podcast or are you collapsing?
No, it's not. Is that fine? If I'm like this, you can hear?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's probably a good constant distance away.
Okay.
I move back and forth and it seems to pick me up
Yeah.
okay, so I don't know. This is a new setup, so new
Yeah.
mics. We'll see how they work.
Hell yeah.
I think they're pretty good.
I like that you have the white one as well, just to really stamp authority. Like you are the different one.
Well, I wanted to see the white. I like the white. It drew my eye.
Uh-huh.
And maybe we'll get two at some point because it's good to have like multiple mics.
Yeah. Well, I've always thought of myself as like a black sheep. So like really,
Yeah.
it makes sense. And you're very vanilla and boring. So like, it makes sense for you to.
Well, that's why I have the standard strong latte and you have the salted caramel. It all
100%,
fits.
exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, welcome, Harry. Welcome to the Ignorantly Informed podcast.
It's good to be here.
I brought you on, Harry, because look, we've got a lot in common. I think we have a lot of similar interests. You have just finished your undergraduate in psychology with honours.
With honours, it's very important to mention that.
Yes, it's a key point.
You gotta, yeah.
Essentially, in a psychology degree, it's without the honours, it's hard to get any kind of route into a career. In it.
May as well have done a Bachelor of Arts with Communication. Like, without the honours, it's nothing.
Yeah, and as part of your research or as part of your honours program, you're part of an honours thesis, which is the process. But yours is one that's actually going through to being published, or is it on the process of attempting to?
Yeah, so it hasn't been submitted yet.
Yeah.
But we are currently. I'm still working on it. It's like I could go into it, but it's going to be published. Yes.
What's it about?
So essentially, we looked at the self-regulation of recreational runners and how injury-prone and injury-resistant runners differed in their ability to regulate running-related injuries. So, I guess on a very like broad level, runners differ in everyone individually differs in the way that you regulate everything across your life. And so like for school, everyone differs in the way that they go about their assignments. Some people do it last minute. Some people map out every single minute of every single day. And like everyone has a different way of like how it works for them and what they prefer. And it's very similar for runners. So some runners will tend to be push and run every single day, and other runners will be very strategic about when they run. And essentially what we were looking at is how what the differences are between those who get injured a lot and those who never get injured or very rarely get injured. And we can go into depth about the results that we found, but to be broad, I guess what we found essentially was that those who are injury prone are unable to kind of recognize the signs that their body's sending them that they're injured. So obviously our bodies are very smart and they send us a lot of signals when we do anything. And so those who got injured a lot were unable to kind of either unwilling or unable, I think is very important to specify, because a lot of people were able to recognize that their leg hurts or their calf hurts or something. But a lot of people are like unwilling to actually act on that information. And I think that's important to really specify early on. Because there's a bit of contention within running research as to whether runners are able to kind of recognize this and verbalize this, and verbalize like how they go about regulating and verbalize whether or not they're like picking up injuries. We've found that runners are very good at being able to recognize this stuff. It really just comes down to whether or not they're willing to do something about it and whether they know like what to do about it. And I think that was kind of like the big thing that we found was that, yeah, those who are injured a lot are unwilling or simply do not know what to do with the information that their body's sending them.
Right. Do you think part of it is, in a culture of running, is pushing through the injuries? Because it seems to be everything you see about people who do running, especially extreme distances. A part of it is just, you're going to be injured. You just have to push through it a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's hard. And this was a big part of kind of like the introduction of my thesis was running culture, especially now, is very centered around how much and how long you can run for, how far, how fast. actually had a chat to our friend Sturgos this morning about this. And, there's currently a guy running from Sydney to Brisbane in 10 days. His name's Cam Flavel. It's very impressive, and he's doing it for charity, and it's very cool. But we were kind of commenting on that almost doesn't seem like that impressive anymore, because we have people like Ned Brockman who ran across Australia. We have another guy called Alex Barbas who's running from Perth to Sydney and back to Perth, or it might be the other way around. And he's doing that. And it's like, okay, well, cute. You're running from Sydney to Brisbane, like whatever. Like this guy's about to run across the country twice. And it's almost like, what's impressive anymore? Like what is actually cool, And that is the state of culture in running. Like it is that, like, how far can you push yourself? Are you willing to hurt to the maximum degree? And it's like pushing aside the fundamental things that you need to look out for when you're running. Like you need to be aware of your body's capabilities. You need to be listening to your body and being like aware that sometimes you're just going to have to like stop and take a break. It's not, and I also want to make it very clear that it's not healthy to be running 100 Ks a day for 10 days. Like that is not a healthy, normal thing to do. And your body is not meant to do that. And so like, it does scare me a little bit, to be really honest, that like people are so like, people are glorifying this stuff and normalizing it as well. Like that is really quite scary to the layperson who then thinks that, oh, I can just go and run a marathon with no training. I ran a marathon 3 weeks ago and I'm still sore, and I run often. Like I'm not saying that I'm like a great runner, but like running is a big part of like my life, and I run, anywhere from 40 to 60 Ks a week consistently for the last several years. And I ran a marathon the other week and I'm still sore. And that was one 40K block. And then you've got people running 100 Ks a day for 10, 20, 30 days. Like it's not normal. And I really, like, I'm very passionate about this, as you can probably tell, but yeah, it's quite scary, and I don't really like it, and I don't like where it's going. And as far as I'm concerned, it is only going to get worse.
Yeah, people keep saying, well, these are the people who get all the attention online, are the ones who are doing the extreme feats. And then people getting into the sport, I guess, are thinking, well, I may as well go hard from the beginning to get there quicker, maybe. I don't. Yeah. What do you think? Do you think it's just, okay, I admire what this person's doing, I'm going to follow that model instead of actually taking a systematic approach to...
It's really interesting, because I think it's kind of a combination of a few things. I think it's cool to admire what they're doing, and I admire it. I think it's like, well, admire is maybe a tricky word there. I don't condone it, but I do think it's impressive. But I think it's also like a lot of people don't have a fundamental understanding of like what goes into being able to do that. So I think like the training load required, the sort of like trauma you have to put your body through to be ready to do that. I think a lot of people just like don't really understand that aspect of it. And so it's easy to glorify it when you don't understand that, and when you're not experiencing it as well. And like I've probably like derailed your question, but like, yeah, I think that is kind of a big thing there, where like you can glorify it if you don't understand like the impact that it's having on your body and the trauma that you have to put your body through to be able to get to a point where you can do it.
And to be fair, going from not running at all to then running a couple of kilometers, you do realize that, oh, this is a taxing thing that requires...
Yeah.
Like it actually doesn't take that long to work your way up to 5, 6K and feel okay. But going from nothing to that...
Yeah, and it's
like you feel it straight away. You know, like, oh, I've got to do this a lot to actually be able to handle it. My body does not like me for doing this.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you have experienced this like in the last like couple months, or at least like early this year, you went through your running phase.
Yeah.
You know, which everyone goes through. It's cool and I love it. And I support it. But like, you know, you would have felt that like running is really like impactful on your body. And then it's like it's quite a heavy like load that you have to put through. Like when just even like on a basic, like your calves, like every step you take when you run, your soleus muscle, which is like at the top of your calf, 8 times your body weight is going through that muscle. And like, you know, I weigh 100 kilos. And so that's like 800 kilos going through my soleus muscle every single step. You know, so if I think about it, I took 7,400 steps on my run this morning. It's really ridiculous that I know that, but like,
It's the watch.
you know, you could, yeah, exactly right. You could, you know, calculate how much force that's putting through that tiny muscle. Like, that's insane. And so, you know, for someone like yourself who's gone from no running to even just like 3, 4, 5Ks, that's still like a massive increase in impact going through your body.
This is why a lot of the sports scientists I'd hear talk on podcasts. I think one of them, Andy Galpin, will talk about if it's just cardio you're trying to implement to a routine, running isn't the first thing you should go to because of the overall impact and how much it's going to take away from any other kind of training or everything else in the rest of your life. It's very taxing. Something like swimming, less taxing on the actual physical muscle, even though it, I mean, to me, who's not a natural swimmer or didn't swim a lot growing up, swimming is such a more, I don't know, bang for your buck. It's very intense when you get into it. It's very hard. I can't do it for long.
Swimming's tough. Swimming really is. And
but less strain on the actual physical body.
yeah, it's really, really good for you, obviously. But swimming, yeah, and swimming's one of those things where it can feel quite lonely, and it can feel quite like it is really quite like you almost like get a bit of like a fight or flight response when you're swimming because you're restricted in your breathing, and you're still putting a lot of like cardio effort in. So for people that haven't swum before, it's really quite a challenging, mentally challenging experience as well, on top of the physical challenges. So yeah, but in saying that, like, swimming is one of the best cardio activities you can do. Some other stuff like that's probably more along the lines of low impact is like even just cycling.
Cycling's a big one,
yeah.
but cycling is an easy one to get into if you.
People also don't realize like how good just going for like a long walk is. Like, it's I've got one of my old coaches, his name's Angus Dean. He's an absolute animal, but like, he is so big on, if you want to lose weight, if you want to get better at cardio fitness, go for longer walk more. Walk in the morning, walk in the afternoon. If you don't have it in you to go for a run every day, go for an hour walk. Like, yeah, it's not hard.
It's movement. It's dedicating time to move your body.
Yeah.
This is why the 10,000 steps, it's a great metric, even though it came from, I believe it was like a pedometer company.
Yes.
Started it as a
Japanese
pedometer company. Yeah, as a thing, but it just happened to be like, oh, that's actually a pretty good metric to hit in order to ensure that you're moving maybe the bare minimum in a day.
Yeah, very similar to like the 10,000 hours sort of theory, where it was kind of just like an average of a paper that was published an average, and then this Japanese like pedometer company ended up being like, yeah, we're gonna make that our metric and our gold standard for our product. And yeah, it's popped up. It's the new thing. But in saying that, it's like, it's not dangerous. Like, 10,000 steps is a great metric to hit. It's achievable. It's not too much, but it's also like not too little. You know, it's a very good kind of metric, I think.
Yeah, you'll keep your heart in a decent state if you're doing that every day consistently. It is obviously, the more you do, the better off you'll be. It's something like a dedicated hour-long walk, or even swimming, cycling, even resistance training. If you are already doing that, just slightly up the intensity in it.
Yeah, and I think, not a hot take at all, but having like a holistic approach, trying to do as much as possible within your capacity. Like, especially with running, if you're running a lot, you should be doing resistance training. That's like a no-brainer. And yeah, just like trying to have a broad scope as much as possible. Like that, going back to like the research that I was doing, it's like one of the most consistent things is those who have a broad scope of fitness and a broad scope of physical activity are the ones that are healthiest, because they understand that like, I'm not a runner by identity. I'm someone who enjoys fitness. And that is really important. Like, that's a really important distinction to make. And it's like something like, I don't consider myself to be a runner, but I'm like, I really enjoy physical fitness and physical health. And on a more like my paper was qualitative, so I did a lot of like long format interviews, 45 to 50 minutes. But alongside my paper, we also did a lot of quantitative research out of the University of Rome. My one of my co-authors, Leonie Walter, she's a German physiotherapy student. Actually, I think she might be graduated now, so physiotherapist. But a lot of looking at like what were like the personality traits of people who got injured a lot, and this idea of like passion and harmonious versus obsessive passion was like a really big one. And so I'm sure you can probably like assume from the names, but like harmonious passion is like, can running like be a harmonious part of your life? Can you be passionate about it but still understand that it's just like a small part of who you are and what you do? You know, it adds to your life rather than taking over your life. Whereas like this obsessive passion is very different. And you know, we all know people who are obsessive about things, and that pursuit takes over their life, and not always in a really detrimental way. I want to add that, but like, you know, in a way where it's like, probably you could afford to like occasionally take the afternoon off or take a step back, you know, go, you don't have to like stay up till midnight doing this thing. You can take a break. Or for running, you know, you've got a sore calf, just take a day off. It's not like that hard. And so, yeah, this idea that those who are able to add physical exercise and physical activity, or really anything for that matter, it doesn't have to be physical activity, anything to their life in a harmonious and holistic way, are going to be the healthiest and are going to be almost like the most successful. And not to go in another direction completely, but Alex Hormozi, I really want to talk about this. Gosh. Because so Alex Hormozi last week, not to timestamp this podcast, but recently Alex Hormozi put up a post basically saying that if you're between your age of 20 and 30, you should not have a work-life balance. You should be grinding yourself into the ground, and basically just like work-life balance is a bunch of bullshit. And you know, he's like, I think is the exact sort of quotes where, you know, you're too young to have a work-life balance. You know, one of the greatest attributes that you have as a young person is that you can work yourself into the ground and get up and do it again the next day and be fine. And personally, like, I hate that so much. From a holistic health perspective, I think that's incredibly detrimental, especially because of his audience as well. I think it's like such a bad thing to be putting out there. And he got absolutely grilled in the comments, and I'm glad, because I think it's, you know, not that Alex Hormozi is ever going to change his opinion.
No, it worked for him.
Yeah, very, very stubborn guy, and good on him. He's successful. Pop off. But like, I hate this, the promotion of that sort of behavior and that sort of mental thinking. Like, really, I don't like at all.
I think there's a place for it in a way where it can't be so rigid, where you can have periods in your life where there are things that take more priority than others. So
yes,
for short periods of time, an obsessive focus on work, hugely beneficial. Mm-hmm. But for such a broad scope of 20 to 30, it's too broad. Like, there are going to be periods where, yeah, I'm going to focus on this thing because it's going to benefit my whole life more if I do develop myself in this way. Like anyone attempting to become a doctor, going through medical training and doing all the, what do we call it? I've got residency, stupid American influence. Do we just call it placement?
Yeah.
Regardless, whatever that 2-year period is, that's your whole life for those 2 years when you're in that. So in that moment, there is no work-life balance. But it's for a small period of time. It's one of those things where there are maybe a few people who can always have it where it's just all work, it's all one thing. But you do need to perhaps segment them over times, where you're going to obsess over a thing for a period, and then you got to balance everything back. You got to then, okay, I got to focus on this now. I got to focus on this. Got to focus on this. But I do think in terms of the harmonious and obsessive, what was the phrasing? Passion, yeah. For some people, I think I might be one of these. In order for something to become a harmonious passion, I've got to be obsessive about it first.
Interesting.
It's like I'm pressure testing it to see if it's going to stand the test of time for me. If it's something that I'm going to implement into everything I do going forward. So I go obsessive at first, and then some things stick, most things don't. But it's like a weird vetting process for me. I wonder if that's covered in the literature that she was referring to. Did she come up with the terms, or she's referencing them?
No, so harmonious and obsessive passion it's a pretty well documented kind of psychological, I don't know what the word would be, but like psychological like
phenomenon,
yeah. We were just really looking at whether there was a difference.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting. You've spoken about this with me before. I'm just like, I understand, and I wonder if it's not like we're overcomplicating it, whether it is just like, oh, this is something I'm interested in. And then once like the novelty of that interest kind of wears off, it like it kind of just integrates into your life a bit more seamlessly.
Or it disappears.
Yeah. And yeah, so I don't know whether you need to like complicate it and put these like kind of terms on it as like, oh, I'm obsessively passionate about this now, and then it harmoniously like integrates into my life. I think it's just like as simple as, you know, for example, like the podcast, you're obviously very like interested in this podcast, and that's good, and it will just integrate into your life and become a part of like your life over time, and you just figure out how it fits into your life. I think what I'm more talking about specifically is people who it's detrimental to their mental, physical well-being, and they are unable to recognize that, right? And so, for example, I'd be shocked if you were doing anything so obsessively that it was detrimental to your physical and mental well-being for like a long period of time without you being self-aware enough to recognize it.
Yeah, I don't think that has occurred where it's been, well, that would be an obsessive compulsion, and some of these could turn into like addictive behaviors, right? But in terms of that, typically not. No, nothing's been so obsessive where everything else takes a complete, but it'll be a period where there'll be 1, 2, 3 weeks where like in almost all scenarios, I'm thinking about the thing, or I'm thinking about what I'm going to do with the podcast, what I need to get, what I need to, even at the beginning of this, the first week or two was very much everything I need. My whole brain was focused around that. But not to the degree where when I'm with the kids, I'm not even paying attention to them thinking about the podcast. There's never that level. So there is always that kind of balance there.
And that's very normal.
Yeah, I would think so.
That's a very normal thing to experience, you know? It's, I mean, not to like, it's very similar with like when you, I don't know, meet a potential partner for the first time. Those first couple of weeks, like it's all you think about, you know? And it's very normal. And then over time, it just kind of like seamlessly becomes a part of, you think about it less because you're more secure in it, or you just have a better way of kind of understanding and like having like compartmentalizing it in your brain.
I think a lot of it, like you said, is it's a novelty aspect of it, right? So you're now engaging in a thing you've never done before.
Yeah.
You maybe never even thought or knew what it would feel like thinking about the thing. But once you do it, now So I was thinking about this. I was actually thinking about something very similar the past couple of days, where it can work good and bad ways, where if you haven't done a thing but you're thinking about doing a thing, the task or whatever it is seems so difficult to do until it's actually been done, or it doesn't enter your brain as a thing that is possible for you to do until you've actually done it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's terminology out there. I'm sure there's phrasing about it. But it was one of these things where a light bulb went off for me, where it's like, even with the podcast. So when I first did it with Luke, I'd always thought that might be cool to do that, but I never entertained the idea that it was even possible to start one. Then me and Luke started one. Well, he started one and I jumped on it. And then after that, even when it finished, the possibility of me doing one was so attainable and in my brain as a possible thing to do. Whereas that framing was never there before. Like I had to actually have experienced it to know that it was even possible to do, even if I had thought about doing it in the past. So it's such a strange thing where it's the familiarity of doing a thing, taking away that, well, I don't know, the novelty of it, but maybe not even that, but just actually getting a foot in the door and doing it facilitates you actually being able to do more of it going forward. But this can also be the case in bad things where it's like, you stay away from taking a certain substance. But then when you take it and it doesn't turn out that bad that first time, perhaps it opens the door for more and more going forward because there wasn't a negative consequence to it. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking about it in my head of like, this is a good thing and a bad thing. And I can see how it can go both ways. And I can't remember what it was that's made me start thinking about it.
Yeah. I mean, you've always been very interested in addiction. And I think like it's probably along the same like lines as that. Something that I've been thinking about similarly is kind of like this. I have felt like in the last couple months, just with like the changes in my personal like professional career, like I felt a lot of like imposter syndrome. And I think like it's almost like a little bit similar. Like you feel like you can't do it, or like you shouldn't be in the positions that you are. And then over time, it just like normalizes for you, you know. And 2 months ago or whatever it might have been when I started like my current position in like mental health, I would have been like, why on earth are they allowing me to do this? And like, I can't do this. And like, what on earth am I doing? But now it's like, okay, I just go to work and I do it. And it's like, I can do this. And so it's like similar. It's like when you do it, you like almost like you have to prove to yourself that you're capable of doing it. That's a little bit different to like what you're talking about with this,
like a foot in the door to,
yeah, or like you experience it and so you're like, okay, this is like, it's just like normalizing it, I think, a little bit. You know, it's, I don't know, and it's like one of those things where like the best thing that can happen to you the first time you like gamble, for example, is that you lose. Like the rate of people winning on their first time gambling and becoming a gambling addict, it's almost like that is the thing that causes gambling addicts, is you win.
That's early a huge factor. It's the winning your first time. Yeah,
you know, and when I see young people who are very like averse to drugs, it's because their first experience of doing LSD, for example, was terrible. And so like that sort of stuff. Whereas like if their first experience doing drugs is really good, it's like, oh, this is something good. This is like, it's associated with like positivity. And so like I think it's probably along those same lines. Like you just, when you experience it and you understand how it fits into you and your life, then you can make a decision as to how much that thing's going to be a part of your life going forward, potentially.
Yeah. There's also the case that the earlier it is you expose yourself to good or bad experience, the more likely it is you'll do it again and again. That is one of the things I believe Anna Lemke in Dopamine Nation was talking about, is the number one predictor of alcoholism, or one of the top ones, is early exposure to alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which to a lot of people's minds, because there is a common belief that if you expose your kid to like a sip of wine at dinner younger, you'll create a relationship where they're not abusive towards alcohol. Like this is a very common thing. Maybe it's in a Mediterranean or Italian families, Greek families, where it's that kind of thing where there's a little bit, you develop an appreciation for it as just a thing you sip. It's not like a thing to be abused, like, you know, the heavy drinking culture there is when you turn 18 in Australia, or a little bit younger for a lot of people. But
a little bit.
The number one predictor, or one of the top ones, is the earlier exposure to it. And I think most people don't understand that, because no, it's probably better that you don't expose them to the taste and feeling of it in a very early developmental stage, where they're going to be more likely to form a positive relationship with the thing.
Yeah. That's really funny. I'm not gonna say his name because I might dox him, but I had a teacher at school who used to, when we were just graduated year 12, we were all like early 17, and we used to go over to his house for dinner, and we still do sometimes, but yeah, like very free flowing alcohol, like very available. And he was very big on like, I want you guys to be able to like drink in a safe place, where, so that when you get to 18, you are like not, and that's not to say that a lot of us hadn't drunk before, but it's like about that early exposure in a controlled environment where you feel comfortable and you can like make mistakes, and it's not going to be like super detrimental to your overall well-being, and it's not going to be associated with like traumatic events and stuff like that. Whereas like you see a lot of people, especially younger people, who are abusing substances because they've gone to it as a coping mechanism, and it's not in a controlled environment, and it's to drown out other stuff. And yeah, so I can see how having like with your, I mean, are you doing it with your kids now or?
No, there's going to be no alcohol. They're not
Okay.
touching it till they're.
Really? Okay, so you're actually going completely against everything you just said.
No. What I'm saying is the earlier exposure causes alcoholism.
Oh,
That's the point I'm making. Is the number one predictor of becoming alcoholic is the earlier you're exposed to it.
I've actually
So
completely missed that.
yeah. So each. So I was going to ask. Okay, so you're trying to frame it in a way where there are perhaps scenarios, and you maybe did think of perhaps a point that wasn't mentioned or that I didn't remember if it was considered is maybe it's because a lot of the people having alcohol really young are perhaps, maybe it's a coping thing, but maybe they're just going to parties at 13, 14, 15, having excessive amounts, and there's absolutely no control and they're careless with it.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe it's not the more common thing to be slightly exposed to it in a controlled, safer environment. Maybe that's a factor that wasn't considered in whichever study was being referenced in this book or by the in the literature, commonly enough. But yeah, it was the thing where the earlier exposure was, and I don't know if 17's still early in terms of brain development. You still got a few years before you're fully formed. So it was every year younger, the more likely you were to develop an alcohol abuse disorder.
This is a very like nerdy science brain of me, but like, do you know the sort of demographic that we were dealing with? Like, we were dealing with affluent, kind of high SES people with like stable income parents and that sort of stuff, or are we dealing with lower income people who have less access to stable family support and that sort of stuff? Because I can, not to stigmatize, but I can see a scenario where people, I guess it would probably be most likely university students that were being
typically the studies lean towards them.
So I would say it's probably actually more likely that it's high SES people.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly. It was just a reference from the book.
Yeah.
And she's spoken about it on podcasts too.
Okay.
But I don't remember the exact citing, if it was cited.
But yeah, that's really interesting. To be honest, like I don't have any strong views. I mean, obviously I don't have kids, so like God forbid. But I don't know what my approach would be. So you're very strict on no alcohol?
It seems like from what I've listened to, what I've read, what I understand, just the earlier you expose them to substances that have such huge changes in your brain chemistry in the moment and make you feel certain ways, the earlier you expose, the more likely they are to become or to develop an issue with it. So I am very much of the mindset of I've got to develop a way or figure out a way to convince them not to do it, but do it in a way where they don't do it out of spite towards me, because lots of kids go through a rebellious stage at a certain point where they're going to abuse or do some kind of drug or some kind of drink. They're going to go to parties, whatever. But to try to give them as much of an education on that, because I have become convinced that it is the earlier exposure in terms of what I understand about brain development too. So the habits and things you form earlier in your life. So when you're a teenager, 13, 14, 15, 16, these things, they're very difficult once they've been wired in your brain you can't even unwire them. It's to develop better wiring around them to avoid continuing that behavior. So it's about not developing bad habits, especially when it comes to substances you can abuse, too early, and probably encouraging them to really think about doing this now, because there are consequences down the line that maybe you'll be okay, most likely you'll be okay, but you're just opening the door to that earlier than you otherwise would.
Yeah, I wonder if it's not so much about being really strict on like that one aspect, but it's more kind of creating I don't know, not creating a person, because obviously you have like whatever, but kind of promoting overall like general wellness, and then understanding how the alcohol fits into that overall general wellness. Because I think it would be, and as to your point, it's really difficult to convince someone to not do something, but then also not push them so far that they're going to do it out of spite and out of rebellion to you pushing against it. So I wonder whether like a better approach I'm not going to tell you how to parent,
No,
obviously.
I'll give any advice, like,
But
take it on board.
For me, it feels like I have been most passionate about sobriety and about kind of overall wellness when I have been kind of motivated to do so due to my interest in like overall health, right? Rather than if someone sat me down and said, you shouldn't be drinking anymore. It's like, well, okay, but that's like cool, but like, why? You're like, you know, and so I think potentially like it's more likely that promoting overall health and well-being and understanding how alcohol and substance fits into that is a more realistic way of having them, because then you're not saying, well, I can't drink alcohol. It's shifting that mindset from I can't do this thing to I am this person, or this stuff's important to me, you know, and understanding that a 16, 17, 18-year-old teenager is not going to really, like, it's tough to have them care about that sort of stuff, obviously. But I just think, like, if you're looking at how to promote reduction in substance, I was going to say abuse, but that's unrealistic and unlikely. Substance use, I think promoting overall well-being and understanding how substance use is one like facet of that.
But I think you're right. And
Yeah.
I think that in terms of when I was talking about trying to be diligent with the approach of it, it would be more about propagating the positive of staying away from these, as opposed to this is all the terrible things that can happen. Like I don't know how to express that to a 15-year-old child yet, or maybe I would be able to in a way, but who knows what sticks and who knows what they're actually going to listen to. But no, I think it is important to, especially now, to even start thinking about. So the eldest is 11, so to start, or 10, turning 11, to start thinking about now, because it's not that far in the future where we're going to have to start having these conversations, or where it's going to have to be like, well, you know, should you really be doing that? All right, is it in alignment with what you want to do here? Is it going to take away from that? Yeah.
And we learn by watching as well.
Yes.
Like we learn by understanding what's around us and what other people are doing. We're very like obviously we're social beings, and we're heavily influenced by what the people who are important to us are doing. And so if I had to make suggestions, what I'd suggest is that like you go to the farmer's market every weekend and you buy 100% all natural whole produce. You stop drinking cow's milk and just only drink like almond milk, soy milk, that sort of stuff. Get rid of these dare ice coffees. Become basically like a green thumb lefty would be my suggestion. That's the only foreseeable way I see you having your kids not consume alcohol.
Wow, that's great advice. Maybe perhaps a bit of a stretch.
Well, that's what I do.
Yeah.
Apart from Saturdays when I binge drink.
Yeah, well, you got the healthy balance. There you go.
Exactly right.
But you are a 20-something-year-old man. It's okay. You're allowed to make that decision, and
thanks.
Perhaps it's not going to be as detrimental.
No.
But no, it's a interesting thing to try and consider, and to try and think about ways in which, because you're absolutely right in what you do in a serious matter.
Yeah.
What you do is what they're going to take in the most, more than what you say.
Yeah.
Thankfully, me and my partner do not drink like at all. So it's an easy one to implement, because they're not going to grow up in a house where they're going to see their parents drinking all the time. So maybe it's going to be a little bit easier for us than someone who's a little bit different situation. But
did you used to?
I was never a big drinker. When I was 18, there were periods when I went out on the weekends and stuff. I don't think I've ever just had a drink by myself.
You're not strongly like you're not. So like I've seen you have beers, so it's not like you're like vehemently against it.
No, people should be allowed to make their own decisions, especially as grown adults. Yeah. Grown adults should be allowed to make, they can, any kind of decision when it comes to what they're putting in their body, they're up to them. Like I'm very much, in that perspective, libertarian, do whatever you want. But yeah, and even if you're drinking a lot, like it's fine, it's your business. I know for me, and I understand, like, well, that might be potentially a unhealthy thing to do, especially if you're doing it a lot. And if I care about you and know you well, I'll probably tell you that. But I know you're not going to listen to me necessarily, but that's fine.
I certainly won't.
Yeah, that's just my due diligence, I think, as like a good person or a good friend is, if I see you doing something that I know something a little bit about in terms of if it's going to be harmful, I'm going to tell you, hey, this is why it might be bad, but I understand you're not going to listen. I would not listen if I was in your position because I am very stubborn myself.
Can I ask you something? So something that I've been really struggling with recently is not going full, like, I have no psychology qualifications, but I've found it really tough. I do like some low level supportive counseling stuff, and I find it tough sometimes to like put that hat away. And obviously you're very interested in like the psychology and psychotherapy and that sort of stuff. And do you find it tough to not like therapize people sometimes? That's not a word, but like you get my vibe. Like, because I sometimes will find myself having conversations with people and I'm like, I need to shut up and just like let them live. They don't want my advice. Do you ever have that? Is that something that you struggle with at all?
I certainly did younger where I would talk too much. Oh. I think over time, I still talk a lot. But when it comes to conversations where I'm just taking interest in the person, I've become much better at letting the person talk. Because I think a lot of these good conversations like this, perhaps different types of therapy, it's slightly different in the way it's organized, but one of the key things is you just stop, you ask the right questions, and you let them talk and they'll tell you everything they want to tell you. And people will tell you a lot if you actually care about what they have to say. This is the thing, I don't know if you can fake it, maybe you can, but you have to genuinely be curious about the person and what it is they're saying, and they'll tell you a lot of things. And you have to prove to them you care though, but just listening and not talking, sitting there and being in that moment with them, they talk to you more. So yeah, when I was younger, I would talk way too much. I was very much I was chucking advice out there. I was, no, you should be doing this. We should be doing this. We should, the past 3, 4, 5 years. And perhaps it was when I got back into psychology, back into the interest of that, where I started to hear and actually take in the things that maybe I was too young and stubborn to recognize early enough to actually listen to. Just listen.
I think I quote you maybe once a week at least, where you said to me at work one day, like, people will tell you an awful lot if you just shut the fuck up.
Yeah, essentially.
And like, it's so true. And it's like, it's insane that, and I kind of agree with you too, in the sense that I think it's almost being too harsh on myself, in the sense that like wanting to have like deep like therapy style conversation with people, because it is like we're interested in the mental health space because we're interested in people and their stories and like their understanding and perspectives of the world. And so I think it's like a little bit unfair to be like, oh my God, I find myself just like having therapy chats with people all the time, because it's like, that's something that like I enjoy doing. It's something like I enjoy understanding people's perspectives. And so, yeah, I'm sort of like in the moment processing what I've just said, but like, yeah, I kind of agree with you in the sense that it's probably a little bit unfair to be catching yourself having deep chats with people because you're having those deep chats and you're in the field and you're interested in the field because you enjoy their perspectives on stuff.
Yeah, this is the whole reason I've started this podcast, is I want to have one-on-one conversation with people where you can just talk. And like, it's not about me telling the world what I know about certain things. Like, if things are relevant and come up, I'll talk about it, but I want to talk to people. I want to listen to people. I want to hear what people have to say, because I find, I mean, everyone I've actually had a proper conversation with is interesting. There are interesting things about literally everyone.
This is true.
If they can talk and you let them talk, you just got to know how to do it, or you've just got to be willing to let them. And I believe this. And so selfishly, I started the podcast in order to have these conversations with people in a setting where there's not distractions around, where maybe they're more willing and more happy to actually just sit down and talk.
And I mean, I am actually like really interested in kind of this is actually like kind of tough for me, because I'm so kind of used to, not that I'm like not going to talk about myself, because I love talking about myself and I'm very open about that. But I am also like I love hearing people's perspective on stuff. And so it's actually really hard for me to sit here and be like, okay, I can't just like ask Dino like 50,000 questions. Not that I can't do that, but like, you know what I'm trying to say.
We absolutely can, but
it's not what I don't know, not to like peep under the hood, but it's not like the purpose. In saying that, I do want to ask you a question.
And you can, Harry, as many as you want. It is conversational, right? You're the star, but it's conversational, right?
Okay, cool. Yeah. So last week was Men's Mental Health Week. Mm-hmm. And I want to get your perspective on men's mental health, and specifically this phenomenon around the male loneliness epidemic. What are your thoughts on Men's Mental Health Week firstly, but then also on the stigmas and the conversation around mental health within like males? That's a really broad question, so I do apologize.
And I'll just try and pick out things to...
Yeah, try and give me a brief 20 to 30 word answer.
Yeah, so I think for a lot of men, perhaps a lot more, I don't want to say young men, but for a lot of men, one of the barriers to entry in terms of talking about mental health and emotion is perhaps not being as well equipped in terms of how to talk through emotion. And I don't know. See, it's hard to say because I don't know everything that's being done in this realm. But I think there can be a difference in ways you express if you're having trouble, how you feel, like as a man to man, as there would be for woman to woman. I think there are, at least if not inherent differences, enough influenced by culture or by just how we talk about certain things, especially growing up, ways in which we express when we're in distress. Like for me, I know myself, even someone who's studied psychology and understands a lot of the terminology around emotion, talking about my own emotions, it doesn't come naturally. It's very difficult for me to necessarily say how I'm feeling. And for whatever reason, I don't know why. Well, I think there may be a difference in ways in which we communicate with it. Can you tell me a little bit more about what they do, what the goal of Mental Health Week for Men's Mental Health Week is? Is it to stimulate more conversation about men's mental health, men's loneliness? I'm aware that that's a big issue at the moment. A lot of the things I listen to and consume, it's a lot of men being lonely, but I wonder what the influences are with that, because I think a lot of it is we have a kind of environment in society where it's very easy to become distracted and to not have to physically go out and socialize with people. And I think a lot of the problems could be from a lot of young men get interested in video games. A lot of young men get really addicted to pornography. Like a lot of it is a lot of your social needs and your competitive drives are met through video games. So I've heard it expressed, and this was either neuroscientist or psychologist, psychiatrist on a podcast. I can't remember the person who did it, but they were expressing in a way that, it maybe even been Anna Lemke in her book, where video games hijack the circuits in our brain that's hardwired in us to seek achievement in order to develop ourselves in a better way. Right. So succeeding in a video game gives you the neurochemistry of doing a task successfully. Whereas in the real world, if you do that, you're met with either you've improved the skill, you've gained a resource, you've gathered some kind of benefit for yourself going forward. In a video game, these things are they're shrunk down and they're much quicker to attain. So the peaks are there and then the low comes right after. And you can repeat this countless times in a short period of time, making the goods and the drives not as high going forward. So I think a lot of it, especially with loneliness in men, is getting too caught up in these things. Another one, I think, the pornography, I think, is a huge issue for young men. It's such a normal thing for a young man to go for it and be interested in it. And of course it is. you're 13, you have access to a phone. Like, it's just where your brain goes straight away. But then that creates unhealthy patterns in associations with, I don't actually need to go out and meet real women because I'm going to satiate any of those needs just from this thing that's immediate, it's easy, and there's no risk of failure and being shamed or being rejected.
Especially at that age.
Mm.
Like if you think about a 13-year-old, they're probably not going to be coming in like contact sexually with a woman until maybe like 15, 16. So there's like a good 3 years there where they're just like, that is their form of like a sexual release.
But even with that, the drive to go out and even talk to women.
Yeah.
Completely suppressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not totally versed in that or in like video games. It's not really like something that I've consumed much information about. That doesn't mean that like I can't speak to it, but for me it's more kind of I don't want to say that I have an issue with the conversation around men's mental health and loneliness and stuff like that. I don't think that's fair to say. I think it's more the problems that I think people present are a little bit too individual focused. Like I think people generally tend to blame so for example, I think one of the big things with men's mental health especially is people saying you need to be able to talk. Oh, it's okay to speak up. It's okay. If you're not feeling good, it's okay to tell your mates. But for me personally, and this is one of like the big things that I am very irritated about with the conversation, is you have to be with people who make you feel comfortable to do that. You have to be with people who are showing you, not directly, but indirectly through their actions and their livelihood and the way that they interact with you, that this is a place where you can open up and you can talk to them about things that are challenging you, right? So if you're like with people, if I'm really struggling, but my core group of mates are constantly, being sexist, being homophobic, being like derogatory towards people who are like struggling or facing adversity, I'm not going to be thinking that these people are the sort of people where I can open up and show, because I'm being constantly showed that this is not a safe space. And so for me, it's really like a cultural thing within kind of young boys, really, especially, and it's unrealistic to expect, I don't know if that's actually fair to say. I don't think it's unrealistic to expect young boys to not be occasionally a bit controversial is a really watered down way of saying it, but the reality of the situation, the reality of the world we live in is that it is very likely that you are surrounded as a young male with some people who are displaying sexist or like homophobic or racist views, right? That is the reality of the world. So I don't necessarily think, but I think it's about people being able to find others who are making you feel safe and making you feel like you can open up. Because when I look at like Men's Mental Health Week, over the last the data really shows that men's mental health is not that different to women. And if anything, young females within like the 12 to 25 group have a much higher rate of mental illness. I don't really like calling it that, but like mental adversity and mental issues than men. Like, and it's small, it's very small difference, but women generally tend to have a higher rate of mental illness. Men's suicide rates are significantly higher than women. And so I think if you come down to what that probably is a result of, I think it's, as you said, it's the ability to have those conversations. And I think that is what is sometimes missing, is that if we're sitting here talking about stuff and I don't feel like you're the sort of person who's going to make me feel like, who's going to affirm me in my challenges that I'm having mentally, if I don't feel like you're the sort of person that's going to do that for me, I'm not going to have that conversation. right? And so I think it's simultaneously Men's Mental Health Week and the conversation around mental health within men should be focused on, yes, finding the confidence and the empowerment to be able to talk about your issues and be able to talk about the challenge that you're facing, because that is true, that men do find it difficult occasionally to talk about the things that they're feeling and being able to verbalize that. But I also think if you're not necessarily going through those challenges, it is on you as a man to make your social circle feel comfortable that when or if they end up facing a mental challenge, that they feel supported by you. And that is really difficult to do consciously 24/7. But the reality of the situation is that how you behave 24/7 when you're around your mates is an indication to them as to whether or not you are a safe person to talk about their challenges with. And I think that is really the thing that's missing around the conversation within men's mental health. It's too individual focused. It's too focused on the person with the challenge. Whereas I think it should be focused on all men, if that makes sense.
I understand what you're saying. How do you implement something though that, because when it comes to these kind of challenges, the individual, the one presenting the challenge, it's very hard to change a whole society in order to operate in a certain way. So to put the main focus on that, because also a lot of people just aren't going to listen or pay attention.
This is true.
So how do you make it so it's not individual? Because I don't know if you can. I think it would be on the individual to find that group of mates who's capable of facilitating whatever the needs are. And I think part of it is to some men, they don't want to talk about the problems. They want to handle it in a different way. Not everyone wants to express their feelings. That's maybe perhaps not the most effective way for them to deal with what it is they're going through, but they need to know someone's there for them. So also pushing someone to verbalize what's going on, I don't know if that's always the best strategy for men.
I'm not suggesting. Sorry, I think I may have misspoken.
No, I think I'm just trying to clarify. Perhaps there's also those who don't want to speak, but to your point, knowing that there are people there who are there for them, even if it's not like I don't need to have a huge open conversation with my mate. But I know he's there if I need help in any way. So I know I've got that support. So having that group that supports you, that's important regardless of whether they'll support us speak, but they'll support me even if I don't want to speak.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And I think, so it's probably two things just on that. So I think one, it is the responsibility. Everyone has a responsibility for themselves to make sure that they're in a safe kind of place and a safe environment, right? And so I think it is very important that you as an individual, as a man, put yourself in the position to be around people who are going to empower and who are going to be like safe for you, right? And again, like you said, that looks different for a lot of people, right? I also think it's true that it is unlikely that we ever get to a point where every single person, it's not going to happen, where every single person is empowering and affirming and creates safe spaces for others to verbalize their emotional issues. But it could be more realistic for everyone to have access to coping strategies and find a way that works for you to deal with your mental challenges. I think that's more realistic. And so for looking at like men's mental health, I think a promotion of not necessarily speaking up and verbalizing and that sort of stuff, because a lot of people, it doesn't have to just be men, find that really challenging. But a promotion of self-empowerment to find ways and seek out ways that work for you to handle the mental challenges that you're going through, whether that be therapy, journaling. I mean, it's really hard too, because I feel like a lot of the initial stages of dealing with your your core like mental challenges, depression, anxiety, ADHD, that sort of stuff, kind of is processing it through expulsion, like a little bit, like verbalizing it or writing it down, and so like I think it's kind of unrealistic for people to start that journey of healing without processing it like verbally or physically through like journaling and stuff like that. But I think it should be a bigger part of men's mental health in promoting the fact that, one, it's completely normal that you are feeling this way, and two, there are ways you can fix it, and there are ways that you can fix it that work for you specifically as an individual, that isn't just, go to the pub and, talk to your mates over a beer, or go to the shearing shed and shear some sheep while you talk to the boys. Like, not a lot of people, I certainly wouldn't want to do any sort of like physical manual labor while I'm talking about my feelings, but like
some people do. Even working out.
Exactly. Yeah. But like everyone's got a different method. And so promoting people, empowering people to find a thing that works for them should be, for me, a bigger part of the conversation.
But that's individually focused though. That's individual focus.
But it's not really, because it's about
people facilitating you to individually find what works for you.
Yeah,
the key aspect, I guess, is individually focused, but it's having enough awareness out there where you have enough people who are willing to help you along that journey.
It's really complex. Yeah.
So I guess what you're saying is enough people are aware of the individual needs of certain people, or enough people are aware that individual people have needs.
Yeah.
And it is your role and your obligation to help your friends through that.
Yes.
In whatever way they need to,
exactly,
in order to
right.
make that, facilitate that.
Exactly right. So it is simultaneously your job as the friend or the mate to create a safe space, but then it also is obviously the responsibility of the individual who's experiencing those challenges to have coping mechanisms that work for them as an individual. I've said individual about 45 times, but it's yeah. I think that, so yes.
It is tough though, because if it is also that lots of young men are struggling with loneliness, that perhaps mean they don't even have a friendship group to go to.
You know what? Controversial, but the male loneliness is not that much different. Is not that significantly different to female loneliness at the moment. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. But yes, it is.
Okay, loneliness in general for people, regardless. Like you don't have to specify.
Has increased. Yeah.
Yes.
But yes, I do think it's interesting just to note that whilst there is a big social media and like cultural presence for male loneliness among
is this Australia? These Australian statistics you're referring to? Yeah, Australia. Yeah.
A
lot of it, we just get American data. That's part of the problem is
we do.
Even myself, a lot of what I hear is American podcasts, a lot of American data.
Yeah.
So knowing whether to pass that is that the same as Australian data? Both Western cultures, does that mean there's maybe some overlap, but it's not specifically the same? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it is like, not to get too I think there is generally that tends to be a focus on the male perspective of this sort of stuff, just because I think like because of how scientific research is, in that there's a high proportion of research done in the last 20 years with women being more like a high percentage of women in studies than men. That's like generally what happens.
Is that generally? I know this is the American statistic, is that there's now more women than men in university. Is it the same in Australia? It's still trending the same direction?
Look, I don't know.
You're not sure? Yeah.
I'm not sure. I would assume yes.
I think so. I think it's a general trend.
I would assume yes, but it's and look, none of this stuff is easy, and there's not like an answer, a straight answer to it. Obviously not. But I do really just like, I do feel strongly that a more like, such a buzzword, but like a more holistic perspective is taken on it, rather than kind of being like, the issue is that guys can't talk, so what you should do is talk more.
I have a problem with that kind of thinking too. It's no, the issue could be multifaceted.
Yeah. And especially when both men and women are suffering, like mental health in Australia is an issue. I think it's a bit, I don't know the word, but it does a disservice to everyone to simply go, we need to speak up more.
Yeah. It needs to be more tailored, more specific.
Yeah.
There's lots of routes you could go with that.
Reductionist was the word I wanted to use.
Yeah, reductionist. Reducing things to simple fixes. This is probably part of the problem you have with like a Harmozy type who will just put out a statement. It's like, work-life balance doesn't matter. You should be doing this. It's very, very specific. What's it called?
Yeah, maybe that's the problem with like
quotes in general.
Maybe that's the problem with social media, but like
one of the many.
Yeah, is that like it is about short, sharp snapshots. Express your opinion, briefly state why you have that opinion, or sometimes don't even do that, and then let other people process that information as they please and comment on it.
Yeah, I think social media taking up so much of people's attention and time, I'm sure that's at the root of why more people are lonely now. A lot of people are getting a lot of their, again, social base needs from just watching other people live, not actually going out and interacting as much as they could, as well as it hijacking your brain and creating all kinds of issues in terms of attention and.
Yeah. What's your process? Like, I don't want to say self-care, but like finding balance in life. And obviously like you get stressed like everyone. What's kind of like your self-regulation when dealing with that sort of stuff? Like, how do you process stuff? What are your strategies? Do you have like conscious strategies?
In terms of what I do, it's essentially whatever I'm interested or obsessed in the moment, they're like doing that thing.
Okay.
So organizing things for the podcast, even consuming content that I'm thinking might help me with that. So it's whatever interest I've got going on at the time. Hopefully this will be a good one that lasts forever in terms of being able to use it like that. I'm sure I'm not going to lose interest in the process of doing this. This I enjoy. So having something like this, I think that's probably in terms of balance for me. Because like, I mean, I've got a young family. I work full time. Plus I do another job on the side just to help. So having time with them and then having time to do something I'm interested in, that's all the balance I need. Like a bit of family time and a bit of time for me to do the thing I'm no longer obsessed with, which is now like a harmonious passion, I would say. Because I've been able to work it in. Yeah. But having that, for me, that's all I need. When I was exercising consistently, though, I will say this, I felt better, generally speaking.
Yeah, what's happened with that?
And it's kind of insane that I don't keep doing it, given how good I felt. I don't know. I think this is what I was talking about, where I'll go through an obsessive phase of a thing. And I was very meticulous and obsessed with that for the 8 to 10 week program I was doing. And the intention was, this is how I think, is, okay, this is the obsessive thing that turns now the phrasing I've got, I like this way of putting it, into a harmonious passion, because I know it's a thing that I should do forever because of the overall benefits to my health. I've listened to enough people. I've read enough on it. Peter Attia, thank you very much. It's clear that exercise regularly, forever, as young as you can start, till you're old, is the best thing for you. There's nothing that comes close to providing you with a quality, not lifespan, but health span, right? Lifespan probably too. So yeah, what happened with it? A couple of things came up in life where I allowed the stresses to take over and I lost the habit and I just stopped doing it. So there's no real excuse, but I lost the rhythm, and for me, it was easy enough for me not to go back to the consistency of it and start doing other things. Now I kind of have no excuse. So the longer I don't go back, the more I'm going to beat myself up over it, because again, I know it's a thing that for just overall health, vitality, being able to like run around with the kids and stuff, it's just better. It's better to do it.
You should film content.
I see.
Make it a part of your social media strategy is going to the gym and filming.
Part of this podcast is there's going to be no social media strategy.
Really?
Oh, I don't know. There's something about it's something I can't. I crave authenticity.
Okay.
For me to just all of a sudden start promoting shit on social media, given what anyone who knows me knows about how I feel about it, I understand that, look, what's the point of doing a thing if you're not going to put it out? If you're going to put it out and not get it in front of as many people as possible, because maybe even that'll benefit more people if you're talking about something worth hearing, right? I understand the perspective as to why, but I'm very conscious of not being too hypocritical in myself. And I don't know how much of this is just unnecessary insecurity about a thing that I'm doing. So these are things I'm working through, Harry. I try to figure out the best approach to it, but I don't want to be a content creator in terms of, I like doing podcasts. Perhaps if I'm interviewing someone and there's something interesting to record and reference to them, yeah.
Yeah, follow-up question, how much did you pay Slam to do that Instagram story?
Free promos, good friend. Yeah.
What a guy.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm very conscious about being authentic.
Okay.
Because I think authenticity and honesty, like I'm doing this because I like doing it. I'm not too worried about it getting in front of a million people's eyes. Like organically, if that happens over time, great. I can make this a thing I do more than I otherwise would. But it's got to be just from pure enjoyment and me wanting to do it. I think I will lose enjoyment, or it'll turn into too much. How many clicks am I getting? How many likes? If I start to lean in on that too much, because I can see my brain going there already. Like if I can see it doing that, and I don't want that to happen.
I think that's really healthy, to be really honest. I think that's a great way to go about it. And also it might just that side of it might just not be something that you enjoy. You know, like you might not enjoy doing extra content. Like you really enjoy this, but if you lose kind of like the sole purpose behind why you're doing this, what's the point? You know, and I think that's kind of what you're saying too, is like if you start leaning towards how many people are viewing this and what's my social media strategy looking like, it can kind of like remove the fundamental like reason as to why you're doing something. And like I've experienced this like with I used to have a bit of a run club going, and it was
Zone 2 run club.
Zone 2 run club. Chuck us on follow. Actually, probably everyone has. We don't post anymore. It's fine. But I used to run that with my friend Sturgos and our friend Sturgos, and we started it purely because it was something that we just had 10, 15 people coming to run with us on a Saturday, just normally. We had a group of us and we were like, okay, well, let's just like make this a thing and let's just, you know, promote this and see if we can get more people to come and see if we can give people the opportunity to run with us, because like, you know, not to toot our own horn, but like, you know, we're fun people and we enjoy going to the markets and like whatever. So, but you definitely over time, if I texted 10 people to go, oh, do you want to go for a run? And 7 of them showed up, I'd be like, sick, awesome, love that. But if I post on social media on our account, you know, oh, we've got a run club tomorrow, come along, and, you know, say we've got 800 followers and 10 people rock up. It's like, well, I've failed. That's a failure. Whereas like if I was going for a run on a Saturday and 10 people showed up to run with me, I'd be stoked. But it's because it's like, there's always that comparison. And it's like, oh, well, last week we had 30 people show up. Last week we had 50 people show up. Now there's only 15. It's like, well, that's not good enough. We have like failed. And it takes all the enjoyment out of like the fundamental reason you were doing it and you started it, which was to promote running to people who might find it difficult to run in a group and, you know, just be able to find and connect with people to run with. Yeah. And it's like, so I totally like understand not wanting to kind of, you know, reduce this to a numbers game and removing the fundamental kind of purpose of why you're doing it, which is to just have conversations with people and do something that you enjoy.
learn interesting things from people who I find interesting to talk to. Yeah, well, part of it too is reading the book Mastery by Robert Greene was very
Love Robert.
influential, because one of the things he talks about is having mentors. And you don't even necessarily have to know these mentors. So, like, I've listened and watched podcasts for years, and the 3 or 4 that I like the most all do it. There are similarities between them, but they all do it in different ways. 1 or 2 promote a little more. They're a little bit more present on social media. 1 or 2 don't do any of that, and it's just them with conversations and authenticity. But even the one who does, so like Modern Wisdom, Chris Williamson, he promotes like plenty on social media, and I think that's authentically him. That's fine. But then Lex Friedman, who's just doing once a week conversations, long form, will occasionally post a video of him like playing guitar or doing something random. But again, he's just doing less than the other one would, because that's authentically him. So I've been given models from different mentors of, okay, there's a lot of ways to do this. There are some core things that are fundamental, like sit down with a person. I'm drawn to the in-person conversations on that. That's why I want to do that myself. I'm not as much of a fan of the Zooms. I just feel like it lacks the connection. There are some, like Modern Wisdom, he does a lot of good interviews with people via Zoom, but the structure of those shows is more interview than it is conversation. And that's fine. I learn a lot from those too. But having those mentors who you don't even necessarily have to know, which is crazy, but you know them very well because you've heard them speak for hundreds of hours, because the nature of some of the work I do, I get plenty of time to drive around and listen to them. So having those mentors, having that guide of what works, what doesn't, having them talk about don't read the comments, getting hung up on metrics. Like, you have people who have done it successfully, and they haven't had to buy into what a lot of people say. If you're trying to grow on social media, if you want to go and do this, go and do that, you've got to do it this way, you've got to do that, promote this, get this guy on because he's going to get you lots of views and these kind of things. And staying away from that as much as I can, I think would be more authentic for what I'm trying to do. So it's all authenticity is the key.
Yeah. I think it's also like you're quite lucky in the sense that everyone who is consuming your content now is doing so out of support for you, right? And that's like such a like nice position to be in, because it's like the people, they're doing it because they like you and they like the content. And you know, whereas almost like the bigger the numbers get, the less and less of that you have. Your support base might be bigger, but you also have like a larger, like there's more opposition and there's more defiance against like what you're doing. And yeah, I think like early on, especially, like I've heard a lot of people who are big content creators, big people within social media saying like the early stages are almost like you have to be so grateful because everyone that's consuming your content is doing so out of support, because they're like, oh, this is cool and I want to listen to this, or I want to consume this. And I think that's like something really important to remember.
Gratitude. Like, yeah, you're right. I hadn't thought about it in this way, but yeah, the appreciation I have when someone says, listen to it, like, oh really? Thank you so much. Like, appreciate it. What did you think?
Yeah. Do you find you get a bit like, embarrassed is probably the wrong way of putting it, but like, I remember when I used to like release, like my band would release music and someone would be like, oh my God, that song was great. And I'd be like, no, it wasn't. Like, you're just pandering to me. I remember, like, do you ever feel that, or are you confident enough in like what you're doing and your ability to do this that you're like, if someone says they enjoy it, they're like, then it's because they do?
Yeah, I think over time, so because I had the exposure with the Luke's podcast, I felt a lot more embarrassment with that one. And nothing to do with the content or anything, but it's just that was the fresh new thing to me. And I was putting myself in a position I absolutely hadn't been in before. I would feel very nervous and embarrassed. The conversations posting them, I don't feel that nervous about. I don't think I feel like nervous about it at all, especially when I post it. Slam's promo video made me super nervous because there was something about someone else is now jumping in on this thing with me and promoting it, where I couldn't watch his promo video of it. It was so really weird. Like, it came up, I was busy doing something, but I never went back to it And there was like an element of fear in watching it. And it was something to do with like, okay, someone else has now put himself out there promoting for me. For whatever reason, my old school avoidant behaviors came out. And I'm like, I just can't watch that. And by the time I went to go watch it, it had gone again. But I'm like, no, I appreciate him doing that. I said to him, I appreciate you doing it. Like I saw it, but I couldn't listen to it in that moment because there was something, and this I think was like a brief moment of imposter syndrome where it's like, who do I think I am putting stuff out here? Now people are promoting it. Like, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
But that doesn't last for as long as it certainly did from 17 to 25. Like,
yeah.
it's got, like, I now completely feel fine. Like, it's so stupid that I did that. But there are these little moments of imposter, little moments of insecurity where it's like, well, I'm doing this thing. I'm putting myself out there. Like, and the fact that I haven't promoted at all, even on my Facebook to my friends and family yet. Like, I haven't put anything out there yet. And part of it's a little bit of the fear of judgment, a little bit. But more so, it's just, I don't know, I have in my head, I want to have enough of a body of work before I put anything out there so people can see and go through a few different ones and look at it. So it's very weird because I'm still trying to work out exactly how I feel about this. But I know I want to do it. I know I'm happy to post it. It's just when it comes to a promo, I need to figure out what to do with that because am I just overthinking it? Because like, will it make it less authentic if I start promoting? Or is it me promoting it? Can I just be proud of a thing and say, hey, watch it if you enjoy it, follow?
I would suggest that you have enough self-awareness and understanding of like who you are as an individual that if you start posting promotional material and you feel like it's disingenuous, like you would pick that up. And I feel like it's almost like you have to do it a little bit to figure out what is genuinely you and what is pandering to an audience or what is, you know, being a bit inauthentic. Because like even just you being self-aware enough to have that sort of thought process, I think is enough of an indication that you're probably not going to do anything where you feel like it's not a real reflection of like who you are or what this product is. And I feel like that should like at least give you enough solace to feel like, but then you also don't know what authentic promotional material would be if you don't at least put your toe in the water, you know? And yeah, so I think I would be shocked if I ever opened up my social media and you'd put up a video of like that I was like, oh, what on earth is this? Because like you're just not going to allow yourself to do that because I think you would know pretty quickly what is real, what is you, and what aligns with the values that you have and the values that like this show has, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think also, again, thank you, Luke, for the Outspoken show because there were things in that which doing them, I'm like, oh, I do not want to do. I didn't mind at the time, but after the fact, like you said, I'm like, yeah, okay, when I have my show, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And it's just not, it's not for me. But for him in that, it was fine.
You don't necessarily have to use examples from your past podcast, but like when you talk about things that are not aligned with kind of like who you believe you are and what this product is, what are you talking about? Like when you say, I don't want to release material that is inauthentic, like what do you mean?
So anything that's not part of this conversation, like what we did is, and it's fine, we did this thing where it was called like a no pant rant, right? I don't know if you remember these. It was like
was a very
minute videos
listener
with a hot take on a specific thing. And it was just the kind of thing to increase engagement. And like at the time, like I didn't care. It was fine. It was fun. It was fun. And part of it was Luke's show. I was his co-host. So it was okay. But I'm like, for me, I'm not doing anything like that. That's one, it's not in the spirit of what this show is. That was more a current events, takes on things, quick show. Like it's different. It was a different show. It was fine. For that, it kind of made sense. So like anything like, you'll see these on YouTube and all this like top 5 lists, like all these kind of little content things that are purely for engagement.
Yeah.
A lot of people enjoyed them, so there's nothing wrong with those people doing it. But for me to do that, you know I'm getting desperate. If you ever see that down the track, if I'm doing, all right, top 5, you know that it's, I got no problem with anyone who does them, but it's just not me and not me with this show.
20 minutes into the podcast, you're doing prank calls.
Yeah, which again, I enjoy consuming a lot of that stuff, but it's really not what I want to do. So if I ever do it, it's just for engagement.
Okay.
Social media manager's gotten on board.
And you know what? I would not hate it. That's like good stuff. But like, I do agree. You are doing more. Like you want clips, just like you want content from the show. You want to promote the show and what it is, not the brand.
Yeah. I want it to be the main draw is for the people who want to listen to a long discussion about things, and the clips, 1 or 2 clips from each show of just an interesting start to a conversation, interesting part within the conversation that hopefully brings them in to come listen to the whole thing. Because I don't know if there's a craving for it, but I think it would be beneficial to have just more content of long form content out there for people to go to just listen to like long conversations. To, I don't know, remember that we can still have these, because a lot of what we consume is just 1, 2, 3 minutes, even 20-minute videos with real shortcuts. There's something to sitting down with someone one-on-one, because I forget that I could even sit down and talk to someone for 2 hours straight and it not feel that difficult to do, because it's been so long since I'd done it before the first podcast. Like, to probably sit down and have a conversation with someone who's not my partner for 2 hours, you just forget you can do it.
Yeah, because you just don't.
That's right.
You don't do it. So it's, not to get too meta, but like it is tough. And like, even, there are times during this where I'm like long combo, but like, that's not, it's that this is new, it's novel, and I think that's really cool. But it's also like, it was really challenging, and it will get easier for you, I'm sure, over time.
It already feels like up to 2 hours has felt like a breeze.
Yeah. Are you going to go longer? Like 4, 5, 6?
I'm not going to limit it to, if the conversation allows for it. My video setup might not allow 4 or 5 hours, but it doesn't matter. The key is the audio. Having 2 to 3 hours. Like, I think all of the cameras will get 3 to 4 hours out of them.
Oh, surely.
So it's fine. Like, as long as the audio is there, that's the key thing. At least 2 to 3 hours of video. Yeah, I as long a conversation as is interesting for me and the guests to do. I really don't want to go lower than like an hour 45 though, because I do believe in there's something special that comes out of a conversation once you get deep enough into it. Like, you kind of get the first period of a conversation can just be feeling each other out, especially when it comes to people I don't know who I'm going to interview. Okay. Is I'll be wearing a mask, they'll be wearing a mask. It's the facade, and you'll have a facade on. Yeah. And then over time, as you get more comfortable in a conversation and with a person, I think at least little glimpses of the real person come out, unless they're just heavily media trained or really have a lot of specific key points to talk about, which again is fine. But I think the magic of a conversation comes 2, 3, 4 hours in, if you can get there, which, I mean, I think I can. I think it's fun to do. I think it will be fun to do.
Yeah. I think so. You're gonna get like a chess master, or like a, yeah, I hate chess so much, but that's different. I actually don't want to talk about chess. But
when Brian comes on, we'll talk chess.
Oh my god, yeah, love Brian so much. But no, I think that's perfectly normal, and I do agree. Like, it's almost like it gets a bit like loose. Like, the longer you go, the more like loose it gets, And I mean, I don't want to draw comparisons to like other podcasts, but like those long podcasts where, not that, we've had a conversation before about like drinking and stuff like that, but like, I mean, say hypothetically you did an episode where, there was like couple beers, like, maybe 2 or 3 people on, and it just gets a bit like, the longer you go, the looser people get, and like the more willing they are to kind of like, they get comfortable around you, and that's certainly true in like therapy spaces. That's why like the most of the work gets done in like the second and third kind of part of your time with a patient. But Yeah, it is interesting, and I think you have to be willing to like push that and get uncomfortable with that to get there for sure.
Well, you need time to figure out if the other person is like a good faith actor or a bad faith actor. Do they actually, are they curious about you? Like, what are they actually trying to do? Do they let you talk and listen? There's just a lot of factors, which is, I mean, part of the fun of a long conversation.
Yeah, certainly. But yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah.
Happy with it.
Well, we haven't talked about Japan yet. I was going to lead off with your
Really?
trip to Japan.
Man.
So we got there eventually. But tell me a bit about like Japan, because you went there for the research you were doing, right?
Yeah.
Well, give us a little rundown of Japan.
Yeah, so I went to Japan late last month, early this month, and to present at the World Physiotherapy Congress in Tokyo. Obviously, I'm psychology-centered, psychology-focused, but our research was done with the School of Behavioral Science and Physiotherapy at UQ. I was just like a psychology component doing the psychology work. Anyway, yeah, so I went to Tokyo, delivered it at that congress. It was really cool, really scary having like people ask you questions about research that you're doing, especially when they like know a lot more about kind of research than you do. I feel very comfortable in this space because I feel like I'm like talking about it here is fine, you know, because obviously I'm like far more intellectual than you are. So like that goes without saying.
Oh yeah, it's not even comparative.
No. So, but yeah, when I was in Japan, it was really cool. Hot take, don't really like Japan. And I know that's really controversial to say because
everyone's going to Japan at the moment, so it is very, maybe that's why. Part of you's like, everyone's doing this, why am I?
Everyone loves Japan. And I get it. Actually, I don't. But like, I can see the appeal. It's very pretty. It's very clean. The food's good.
Is it too clean?
No.
You need a little bit more grit.
Yeah, I need a bit of more like rigidity and a bit more like, yeah. But no, I really liked it. I spent 12 days in Tokyo, which was a mistake. I should have gone around a bit more and experienced a bit more.
Right.
12 days in one. I spent a lot of time in parks, like reading, which is nice. But you know, you probably
can do that anywhere, baby.
Yeah, I can probably do that today. But no, it was great. It was really fascinating being in, and this is what we were talking about, again, not to bring up like imposter syndrome, but like being in an academic space as someone who doesn't really consider themselves an academic was very challenging, very tough, and being surrounded by people who are very intelligent and really, really know their stuff in different areas, coming to me and asking me questions about stuff, it really makes you realize that you're like, you know a lot more than you think you do, and you're a lot like more capable than you think you are. But then also it like is really challenging and it's just such a great experience. And this is something that I'm really learning as I get older, is that the things you learn through experience is almost like is so much more valuable than the stuff that you learned through your study and your you know, that sort of stuff. And yeah, I think that was my biggest takeaway from Japan, was that I am a lot more capable in these sort of fields than I thought I was. And that probably like is also one of the reasons why I was like so confidently speaking about it earlier, is because like I'm understanding that I actually do like really know my stuff in this area, and that I can deal with people challenging me or digging deeper into like the sort of stuff that I'm interested in, you know, which has been like a massive learning curve for me. And I'm sure you have experienced similar things, and you will experience similar things in, you know, if you're wanting to go long term into psychology or mental health or whatever, or like research. I don't particularly know exactly what you're wanting to do long term, but yeah, it was just so awesome. And
what were they curious most about? Like, what were a lot of the questions around the same thing? Like, what's the main?
It was really interesting. So one of the questions that really stands out to me is the idea that our research was quite simple in terms of like the results that we found. And there's a bit of like a thing in science that in like academia where it has to be super complex, and the more kind of intricate, the more difficult it is to understand, like almost like the better the research. Our research was very almost like boring in the terms of like it was very straightforward, but we could outline what we found and we could outline why we found it. And that's like a little bit and explain that to the layperson. And that can sometimes be like really challenging for academics in the sense that they're like, I don't see many limitations to this, or I don't see many kind of like ways where this could, I don't see many workarounds. And of course, you can say that because the results are quite generic and quite broad, that there are almost like too many workarounds, but then you can almost take like the other perspective of like, this is basics. This is very base level study. This is the beginning of the process of studying this sort of stuff. And what we want is to get to a point where we can figure out like a protocol for people, for runners, to be able to like say, okay, this is what I do. This is how you should self-regulate. These are the steps I need to take. And this is like this is the protocol I need to have when I'm running or when I'm exercising more generally. So obviously it's like very base level stuff, but yeah, one of the biggest, I guess, discussion points from others when talking to me about my research was that it was very basic and easy to understand, and trying to figure out if that is because the results or the research is bad, or is it because it's early level research and we're just trying to kind of develop a framework and develop an understanding of what this will turn into and what this sort of research will turn into. Yeah. And so it does frustrate me that the more complex stuff is, the better it is. Like seems to be a bit of a stigma in research.
I wonder if that's research generally or it's just
life.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can trick people into thinking you're smarter just by using certain words.
But as we know, the most intelligent people can explain complex things in a basic terminology.
Yeah, what is it? If you don't understand a thing until you can explain it to a grade 5.
Yeah. And people mask their inability to explain things by trying to make other people also not understand it. You know? Like, I understand this better than you, but I'm going to gatekeep it.
Yeah.
Which is, I think probably true in all fields. Like I've experienced this in every workplace I've ever been in. I've experienced it in like every kind of part of university, people gatekeeping information or trying to make things seem more complex than they need to be because they want you to think that they're more capable than you are because they can understand and do this thing. And they almost like don't allow you to fully understand it. Right?
Yes.
Because it means if you also understand it, then it means they're not as special for being able to understand it. They're not as valuable. Yeah. And interesting, I haven't found this to be true just yet in my brief experience in mental health. And like I've found, especially because I think part of like, obviously I want to become practicing like therapeutic, like psychologist, like practicing psychologist. So I want to be able to, and part of that is clinical education. A core part of becoming a psychologist is being able to teach others how to, or learn from others who are already there, which is quite unique. Not unique probably in allied health. That's quite like common among allied health, but in terms of jobs, very few, like if I'm an engineer, a core part of my job isn't teaching the next generation of engineers how to be an engineer. It's about them coming to my workplace and dealing with me. I know, again, I don't want to speak for engineers, but like I know from my experience, a big part of becoming a psychologist is learning through supervision and through like active engagement with other psychologists as to how to like better like handle your craft, like be better skilled. And so I wonder whether it is like a specific thing within like the mental health fields as to whether there's not as much gatekeeping, or whether I've just been really privileged in working at an organization at Headspace where people are very open and like transparent in what they know and how you can get to where they are.
You would like to think that it's because it's a domain that's very people centered. It's, for one, it's going to attract people who care about other people. They care about other people more than they care about their own like ego in terms of knowing a thing that they can't learn. And it's good to hear that they clearly want the best people, and by doing that, or by teaching them everything they know, you're not gatekeeping everything, because it's very much a control thing to not allow the people who are doing work that can do what you do not to know how to do a thing. Like, I wonder, I don't think, I'm happy to hear that it's not prevalent in what you're doing. And I don't think it would make sense to be in the realm of psychology. Like, these are people who should be so aware of like mental health and the needs of people around them, to gatekeep information that could potentially benefit people on the most broad scale possible. Seems strange. But I wonder if academia in general, I wonder what their take is on these podcasts that exist, where like some academics go on and they talk about it, they talk about their research. I wonder if that's like widely condemned or widely praised as a means of communicating their information. I would be interested to know how many of them just absolutely hate the fact that some of these people are going on talking about this kind of stuff.
Condemned.
Yeah.
Almost consistently.
That is what I've heard from other podcasts, but I'm pretty sure like
very, very not.
I wonder why. Is it just...
It's got to be just ego, jealousy. This is going to sound ridiculous, but like researchers are some of the most egotistical people I have ever met. Like academics. And it's like, politely, what you're doing is very lame and boring and no one cares about it except you.
Yeah. It's very specific. Like, it's a lot of the time it's a very niche thing that it is, in order to get to a level of understanding where you can even follow what they're doing. The barrier to entry is like probably an undergraduate degree in the thing to even be able to comprehend some of it.
Yeah. And it's like funny because it is such the average person does not care about the research that you're doing, but obviously as the researcher you understand the impact that it's going to have on the world, I guess. And so I understand why researchers get very egotistical and very protective over their kind of field. And it is not. And you got to understand too, like, here's what you have to understand about research. There's a lot of like people are going on these shows for their own like self-interest, of course. But like, you know, it boosts their status within the research field to go on a Joe Rogan, to go on a Modern Wisdom, to go on an Ignorantly Informed podcast. You know, it boosts their standing within the field because other people watch it and go, oh man, I want to, why didn't I know stuff about XYZ? Why didn't I get asked to go on? You know, and then you get your name out there. So all of a sudden you're looking at a paper and, it was published by, you know, Rhonda Patrick. Oh, okay. Well, I know that name. She was on Joe Rogan. That's cool. She seemed like she knew what she was talking about. I'm going to believe this research to be true because I know who that is. And so it's overall so beneficial, but also very, very, very good for the researcher and their career prospects, you know. And
it's weird that it's condemned then. Is it just a jealousy ego thing?
Yes, almost always.
Where's my invite onto the pod?
And like, there's obviously going to be stuff where people are going on. There's a particular researcher that I don't particularly like that I have verbalized to you before. And, you know, some of his styles and some of the stuff that he does. And he goes on a lot of these podcasts and he's very well known. And I don't particularly think that, and within the field, there are a lot of people that look down on that sort of stuff because it is on the more controversial side. And it's like, well, you're promoting this stuff that might not have a lot of scientific grounding. And so there is that aspect to it too, where it's like, this doesn't seem ethical, or this doesn't seem right. But yeah, I
think that's a bit of gatekeeping in itself, though. Like even someone like who you're talking about going on a podcast and talking about things that aren't necessarily rooted in perfect science. Why shouldn't that information be out there if it's something that is interesting from? Because I think a lot of what draws people to podcasts is interest based. And depending on what it is they're talking about, you shouldn't just believe what's said on a podcast just because it's said in a podcast. Like in any realm, you got to do your due diligence in terms of if you're going to actually believe and purport a thing, you hear it and you go do a little bit more research before you actually believe it to be absolutely true.
Sure.
So like, because I guess these people are going to come on podcasts and they're going to talk about what's interesting to them as well. And maybe some of the stuff in their hardcore rigorous research. One, it could be that it's just, I have to explain 30 things for you to even get to the point where you can understand it. But two, it's just not that interesting for them in that moment.
Yeah. And I think it's also about making it relevant to people. Like, it's all very well and good to go on a podcast and talk about your research. But then, like, if you're not talking about stuff that's relevant and, like, applicable and actionable to people, like, you're just going on there to talk about stuff that you find interesting.
And that's where my job comes in.
Exactly
The host should be the one who's trying to extract the things out that, one, they're curious about.
Sure.
Which is...
But I also think it's on the person, the researcher, to be able to make it actionable, you know?
Yeah, to make it, you can communicate it in a way that people can actually integrate into their life.
Yeah, and it's all very well and good for me to sit here and be like, yeah, you need to have more harmonious passion, and people that have a more harmonious passion are better at being able to self-regulate their running injuries. But like, what does that mean to someone, you know? What does that look like? So yeah, I think it is on us to be able to say, you know, you need to be able to have, you know, rest periods. You need to be able to understand that you don't have to do this insane shit that people are doing because it's very bad for you. You know, I need to be able to make that evident to people and actionable to people, because otherwise it's just me saying, here is what I found. Do something with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not applicable. This is why Andrew Huberman gets so much love. He's all about applicable science.
Yeah, love him.
And he does it in such a good way.
Yeah.
I also think the ones who are lecturers as well as researchers, it's not a thing where you have to be a lecturer if you're a researcher, right?
No.
So like the ones who are lecturers and researchers have also developed the craft of communicating the information to a broad scope of people.
And I think that is because they also have to, I'm not sure how familiar you are with like the process of someone becoming a lecturer and having a course at university or having a class at university. But essentially what will generally happen is either there will be like a basic like stats sort of course, like psychology specific. I'm so sorry for people who are like, don't care. But like for a stat specific, like stats is a big part of psychology. So that is a fundamental thing that has to be in the course. But then you have other stuff like maybe like the psychology of criminology or whatever it might be, like psychology of like criminality. That is something that doesn't have to be in the course, but they've asked a specific lecturer to come on and be a lecturer in their course, and the lecturer's gone, this is something that I'm really interested in and that I can share with the students in their third year of psychology to give them a broader understanding of what there might be out there for this like discipline. And so I think what you're talking about maybe a little bit is like those researchers who are able to find something they're interested in or they're knowledgeable in. And obviously you're not going to become a lecturer in a subject that you're not knowledgeable in, but then they're able to make that interesting and actionable and say, this is how you can use this information, because that is a fundamental part of having like a course at university is how can I use this information? What can I use it for? So I think, yes, you're right that people who are also lecturers on top of being researchers, because they have to do that, because they are being forced to learn that skill. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. To communicate, not just to, because when you present like a PhD thesis, it gets tested by other people.
Yeah.
Right. When you're trying to present it, so you got to defend it. But it's not quite in the same way as being able to package the information in a way that like an undergraduate can understand, which is a little more translatable to just generally speaking, people can understand if you were to come on a podcast and talk about your research.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard. It's really hard. And
knowing something to that depth.
Yeah. And like, obviously I'm not good at it, you know, but like, and it's not really something that I care to be good at over time. Like, it's not something that I'm wanting to do, but right now it's something that I'm doing and I'm interested in. So it's like, I got to make sure that it's the stuff that I'm talking about is actionable for people, because otherwise what's the point?
Oh yeah.
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 And especially because I am someone who like enjoys so much like physical activity, it's like also there's like individual level of like if I'm training for something for an event, then I'm like, boom, like I can use this information for me. And then that facilitates my ability to explain how other people can use it, because I've like gone, okay, I can use this in this way for myself, and then therefore I can use this information for others.
Yeah, I know I've done it.
Yeah, exactly.
Better capacity to explain it
Exactly
to you
right.
in a way you can
Yeah.
do it.
It is interesting though. Like I feel like I've become very, a bit of like my threshold for injury is a lot lower now than it was before I started this work. Like
Wow.
earlier in the week, went for a run and my like calf started hurting a little bit, and probably unnecessarily so. I just stopped like 5Ks in and was like, okay, I'm walking home. But then I've been able to run 3 more times this week and it's been okay. So like maybe it's not, but I do notice like myself being more conscious of that sort of stuff when I'm exercising and when I'm training for stuff.
And has it affected your performance?
I don't
Positive
know.
or negative? You not really haven't measured it. In that way.
Maybe I'm pushing not as far as I potentially could. It's not a case that I'm like finding it difficult to exert myself more. I don't think that's true.
Just recognizing when something is a little bit awry.
Yeah, I think it's just being a bit too picky and a bit too conscious.
Hyper responsive to
Yeah, like a bit of a hypochondriac. I think that is certainly something that can happen. But I think that's also natural, and it's about like finding a balance. Like I used to be so into the running, running form, running technique. That was something
we've had a chat about running form. Yeah.
And I read a book about like how Kenyan runners, how like Eliud Kipchoge would like run, and I was obsessed with like understanding how they ran, and I would try to change my own running like form to try and mirror him, and it was a disaster. Like I just I couldn't enjoy a single moment of my run because I was so focused on ensuring that, you know, my pelvis was pushed forward and that my back was straight and that my head and my chin were facing forward and looking at the horizon, and my arms were, and it was just on and on. And I had this big checklist, and that was a part of like the learning was, you know, you have to have this 12-step kind of checklist, and you repeat these mantras to yourself, and you know, by the time you've gone through all 12, you can go through it again because you will have gone through about 2Ks of running, and you repeat it to you every 2Ks, and it really helps with ensuring that, you know, you're not hurting too much because, you know, you're too focused on your form. It helps you keep your form when you're tired because you're constantly, and I was like, give me a break.
There's a certain personality that may enjoy that.
Oh, and I'm sure there is. I am not that person. I just like, you know, I hated it so much, and I just stopped enjoying it. And it was really tricky because this occurred during the first kind of block of my marathon training. And so I almost like lost a little bit like the first third of my marathon training, and it reduced my intensity of training too, because I wasn't going as fast because I was trying to ensure that I was going fast while keeping form. So I wasn't actually going as fast as I could because I was keeping form. And the thought process was that the longer I did it for, the better I'd get at being able to use this form while going fast. So it would like kind of over time.
Yeah.
But I lost like a third of my training block because I just wasn't able to like go as fast as I wanted to because I was too hyper focused on the form. And yeah, it's really, really tricky. And so I've that is not happening anymore. I just go for runs, and Nick Bear, who's like a big, I don't know if you know who Nick.
I haven't seen much of him. I've heard him talked about by
I've
probably
spoken about him a bit, but he's so cool. I love him a lot. Shout out. He is very big on just like your body. The longer you do something, your body finds a way to adapt to it. And I'm like kind of taking that approach too. Is like, yeah, the more you do something, the better you get at it, and the better your body can adapt to that thing. And I think that's obviously true. And it's like ridiculous that I didn't understand that before.
Well, you were just trying to make your body adapt to it.
Yeah.
To a very rigid, specific running style.
And that's not to say that there isn't a place for form in stuff. Like I know my sister and my cousin are my cousin more so, but they like row a lot. And rowing form is very important for the efficiency of output, right? And so how your form with rowing is fundamental to how fast and how good you are as a rower. So that's not to say that there's not a place for form. And it's same with running. Like if I'm running, I've got slouched over knees and I'm heel striking massively by flicking my legs out and whatever. That is bad. But you will learn either intentionally or just naturally over time that you need to stop doing that and that it doesn't work and it's not the most efficient way. And so, yeah, the more you do something, the more efficient you become at it, and I think that is obviously true.
I wonder if even that small period of you putting that real specific input in, though, allowed you to now be more hyper aware in a positive way of when it's falling completely off a cliff in terms of your form. So, like, you now know, okay, this is a strategy that has been deemed and been shown or been seen to be very effective. I don't have to stick rigorously to it. But if I'm falling too far away from it, I know it's going to be problems.
Yeah.
So just even having that brief period of slight obsession of this certain form may have like down the road benefit of now I can implement some of it when I notice I'm getting too far gone.
Yeah.
So that initial knowledge is great, but it doesn't have to be fully integrated.
Yeah. And I think it's also just that like understanding that it's not that deep. Like everyone's different and everyone's got a different approach to everything. And so it's just about kind of finding what works for you and figuring out if that thing is going to be the best thing for you, because you can't cookie cutter stuff. There's very little in life that you can cookie cutter to fit for everyone.
Oh, that's the whole point of protocols. Like you learn what is ideal and then you apply it to you specifically, and you probably don't have to do it exactly how it's expressed.
And the end result...
It's all knowledge probably too.
Probably.
All knowledge is you learn the things, you extract from it what's beneficial to you, and that's what you keep.
Yeah.
And you'll do it subconsciously too. Like you won't necessarily be interested in everything the same.
No. And I mean, I think that is, again, something you have to learn over time. But yeah, like the end result might be the same for 5 people, but how they got there is completely different. Which I think is like really nice, and I think it's especially important to remember when looking and comparing yourselves to others is that like I look at some of my friends and they're very financially stable and very in a really good place with like, they might own homes and stuff like that. But I think it's really important to like understand that the same way that everyone's running form is different, everyone's process of getting somewhere in their career or in their life is different too. And yeah, I feel like that isn't like spoken about and promoted enough.
The most beneficial thing to come out of it is like hope.
Yeah.
Like there are so many ways to do it. I'm not in a situation that necessarily means that there's no hope for me.
Oh my God.
Because there are so many different ways to get there.
Yeah.
Like there's always hope.
Yeah. So one of my favorite books, like it would be my favorite book, is this book called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Tomorrow, Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And one of my favorite lines out of it is like essentially just this severely disabled autistic kid is going through a really challenging time, and he says, life is long. And I think like that is just so true. Life is long, and then the full quote is life is long unless it's not, which is a bit more dark. But I think like the important thing is like really understanding that like your path and your journey is so different, and everyone has a different way of getting there, and you're going to go through phases of your life where things are going to seem a bit like grim and a bit like there's a bit of a lack of hope. But you can also turn around and like a year later, everything's changed and you're like perfectly fine.
Yeah, we're terrible at predicting the future.
Oh my God, yeah. But like, we think we're really... This
is the curse of being human, is you think you can plan things out perfectly, predict what your life's going to look like in a year. And maybe you can in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, but 4, 5, 6. The further out you get, you become terrible at actually know, because so many things can happen. And that can be both good and bad. So like where you are now is not where you're going to be in 5 years. And that could be amazing. That could be a great thing.
And there are phases of your life where it will feel, God, I feel so stupid talking about this as a 24-year-old. Like, it's so ridiculous. But there are phases of your life where it will feel like everything is kind of in place and it will consistently happen. Like when, for example, school, university, that sort of stuff, like everything is generally like following a path, and like it doesn't really change. Like my life didn't change too much between like 20 and 23, or like that university period. But then like after that, when life's a bit more like kind of free flowing and a bit more unpredictable, like there are periods where, you know, it will feel like everything's happening to you a little bit. And that is one of the toughest feelings, is when like you feel like stuff's happening to you rather than you happening to it.
Yeah, low agency. It's very much low agency versus high agency. You don't feel like you're in control of what's going on in your life.
That's really, really hard to experience, I think. And everyone experiences that to a different degree and for different time periods. Like I've been very lucky to only experience that very briefly for like little periods. But when it does happen, it's really difficult, and it's really, really hard to feel like you have that agency, and that, or
you can get it back, or you can develop it.
And I think in a lot of ways, it almost like you can't force it. Like a lot of people can go like completely the other way and go, oh, okay, I don't have a lot of agency. I feel like the world's happening to me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to like hard switch or hard rebel against my past right now to kind of force something to happen that is my doing. And like it happens a lot with that like 15, 16, 17-year-old age group, where they hard rebel because they feel like they're being like pigeonholed or like shoeboxed into a little bit. Like, and it happens midlife crisis, like that, you know, when my dad was like 47, he bought a motorbike and decided he was going to be a big motorbike guy. And like, I was like, what is happening? But in hindsight, he can recognize that he only did that because he just felt like he needed some kind of like forced change, because everything was just in a bit of a lull and a state of kind of, he's just floating through, and things that are just happening to him, you know? And that's not always the case. Like there's also times where when stuff's like really hard and really stressful, and you're like, stuff's just like falling on me, you know? And
it's important to recognize the difference there, because like your dad, sometimes you do have to force the issue, create some of your own agency back. But there are times where it's just, there's not really much you can do practically that's going to change anything. You just keep putting one foot in front of the other, biding your time. And maybe there are small things you can do that can push you in a slightly better direction. You can drink a little less. You can go out a little more. You can see your friends a little more. You can there are certain small little things you can start implementing that may start to get that stuff back. But yeah, it's just agency thing. It's a big thing, and I think happiness and psychology, right, is having agency over what it is you're doing. What is it that got you into psychology? What pushed you in that direction?
Honestly, I don't know. I had an interview for a potential job on Tuesday of this week, and they asked me that, and I really think the answer is quite stupid, but like it kind of just found me a little bit. Like I thought I wanted to do physiotherapy. I thought I wanted to be in that sports science.
You would like the physio conference in Japan, though.
Oh, mate.
These are my people.
I saw a robot giving a massage. It was crazy. Wow. Yeah. We can definitely get into that.
Yeah.
But I think it was more so the fact that I just didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I really enjoyed like listening, like talking to people and hearing people's like stories and perspectives and stuff like that. And, so I was like, mum, honestly, I went to the cafe one day with mum, and she was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. And she's like, well, what about psychology? And I was like, all right. It was actually like truly that easy. I was like, all right, fine, I'll do that. Because I really, at that point, I was 19. I knew that sports science wasn't for me because I hated it. So I dropped out of sports. I dropped out of sport and exercise science, started a psychology degree, and was like, look, if this doesn't work, I don't care. It's fine. I'll figure it out. But I just started it. And then pretty much for the first year and a half, I was like, I'm just doing this. I'm just floating through it. I don't really see a purpose. And then truly last year, when I started working on this research and when I started my honors, that was the first time where I was like, psych and mental health is for me. Like, I love it. I love understanding what people are doing, why they're doing them, and how we can change or promote that. And, you know, it's like I said before, it's you learn, most of my learning in mental health has come from my practical experience working in it. And it's reinforcing that sort of stuff. It's reinforcing. And so, yeah, I don't think necessarily, I was never like one of those people where I was like, I am going to be this when I grow up, or like, I want to do this. I always thought I wanted to do physiotherapy. And I am hoping that down the line, I can still work in the sport field through like performance psychology. And I've done like a little bit of work in that field with, you know, I've done a bit of a tenure at the Brisbane Lions Academy, and that was awesome. Loved that experience. But I also am like very comfortable in knowing that mental health is what I want to do long term, but I'm not pigeonholing myself into like sport or clinical or organizational or, you know, mental health with young people. So yeah, I don't think that really like is a very clean answer, but like, yeah, it's not so much that I was like, this is definitely what I want to do. It's sort of just, I've experienced enough where I'm like, this matches with who I believe that I am as a person. And yeah, it's very, very interesting to me. I know you had a bit of a different like experience. Like, it's definitely been something that you are like, this is interesting to me.
I recognized as a kid, like one of the most fascinating things would be watching shows, especially crime shows, and seeing people do things that I couldn't fathom being in a mind state or having the mental capacity to do, like these, how the people do these evil, horrible things. So mine's from more of a attempt to understand how people can do things, like the dark side of psychology. As I've gotten older, like that's still very much an interest of mine. A lot of the books I have read have been along those lines, but it's developed more into just not just a curiosity as how people do crazy, horrible things. There's always also been a curiosity of just people and not doing horrible, crazy things, but just an interest in understanding people and how they live their life and what shaped them, what's influenced it, what can be improved and what can get better. Things that might necessarily we don't know how to improve, like every aspect of the human. But it was definitely watching, I think it was Criminal Minds, the TV show, like, oh, these guys profile criminals. Oh, they can actually work out why people do what they do, and they can create clean pigeonholes of what exists that it is, which it turns out is not that easy to do.
Yeah, not quite. Criminal Minds is not a...
Offender profiling is a very small field, and I think at the time I was in uni at first, there were maybe 2 or 3 in Australia, and it was like the same ones would get called upon for all these cases and to say if they needed it. And it wasn't quite what I thought it was, but it was definitely an interest in probably the nature of evil actions. And not from a necessarily religious perspective, but nature and evil actions than people and how that can be, well, now how it can be created or how it can be, or how it's, well, the nature versus nurture, how it can be
I was gonna say.
created or how it was always been there, how they interact, all that. Yeah. That's at a core of my interest. But ultimately, there's not that much. I think there's a lot of practical use in understanding that from a self-developmental standpoint. Like, I do think that it is in the interest of a lot of people to understand how someone can become evil if they're not already, how we all have a capacity to do things that we don't think we could if the situation was there and we weren't self-aware enough to recognize us going down a bad path.
Ordinary Men.
Ordinary Men is one of them. The Gulag Archipelago, another one. There are lots of historical accounts and books that talk about this very thing. So that has become a more advanced, a more in-depth look into these things that I was interested in as a kid that I touch base with every now and then. Those things are very difficult to... I don't know if you find this, but when I read a book like that, I'm immersed in that mood that book creates from me for the whole period I'm reading or listening to that book. Like there's a general somberness to my being as I'm trying to process everything I'm reading and trying to understand from it. Because for me, in order to read and engage with a thing or listen to, because a lot of it's audiobooks, because it just works out better for me time-wise, I have to be in a mindset where I'm processing what's going on and trying to think on it in order to get the depth of understanding. But in my life, I feel like I'm more somber and down when I'm fully engaged in these topics.
Yeah.
Do you find the same thing? I think it's necessary to process it properly.
Yeah, I think so. It's also like, I don't consume outside of like your ordinary men and sort of stuff. When I was reading that, that's probably a good example. Yeah, like I found a similar thing, but I don't know. I try not to consume that much of that sort of content because one, very scary. Two, yeah, it just doesn't really like align with the things that I'm necessarily like super interested in. So it just doesn't happen naturally. But I can totally understand like why you would feel like you're more kind of mellow and a bit like, do you find you're more, I don't want to say like wary and like skeptical and of everything, but do you find that it affects your, obviously it probably does affect your perspective on the world, but I could see a world where, or I could see a situation where like I read a lot of that sort of media and it really kind of negatively affected my outlook and my hope and my overall, like it really increased my skepticism and hopelessness on the world. It's like, I mean, need I get into the current state of geopolitical stuff, but like I could see a world where it really impacted like negatively my outlook on life.
I didn't get the negative outlook on life. It made me more grateful.
Okay.
It also made me grateful that I'm interested in these things because I felt like it enables me to become more equipped at just preventing myself from going down any of these, and not necessarily the horrible things, the horrible path, but to perhaps recognize when I'm starting to stray from doing what is just right in my mind or what I deem to be a just thing to do in the moment. And that there are actually probably more significant consequences than just not being honest with myself when making big decisions on things. So part of it was that. Part of what the problem was, why probably I felt the melancholy for long periods of time, is I think I back to back 4 or 5 of these in a row, because I think it was, yeah, this is all audiobooks because it was a period where I was driving 3, 4, 5 hours a night.
Sure. And
God, what were they? It would have been the Gulag Archipelago, which is a book about the Soviet Union and specifically it covers a lot of things, but it talks a lot about the working camps and the conditions of that and how people what they do in that. Ordinary Men, which we talked about, which is a police battalion during the Nazi regime. And in Poland, there was one called Mao's Great Famine, which is another effect of like the communist state and and again the horrible times that. There was one about a Japanese military unit, I think Unit 371 maybe, but this was one where they conducted human experiments on Chinese peasants, either in the lead up to World War II or during. And so I went down this like horrible rabbit hole in like a depth to understand the nature of evil from a psychological perspective. And of course, looking back on it, no wonder I felt, but it's weird. Like I felt like a general air of like deepened thought, a little bit of melancholy. But it was very interesting, and this is probably to the point of the books. I was able to compartmentalize that enough where most people would not have known how melancholy I was feeling in those moments. Because in especially work environments, in the home environment, I'm able to just act normally while having these things going on in my head. It's very, very weird.
That seems healthy.
Thing I put myself through. But I don't think it's a bad thing to do. No. One, because I'm interested and I see the purpose in it for myself. But I also wouldn't recommend someone doing that if they're not completely interested in understanding it.
Yeah, and I think that's
because it could be very
quite
somber.
quite detrimental. But then like you probably look at it and say, well, like what about the people experiencing it?
Yeah,
It's all very well and be like, I don't want to read.
that's right.
I don't want to read that because it's like a bit scary. But then also like people actually went through that.
That's why I think you're probably obligated to consume at least some of that content.
I think so.
If you want a good understanding, or if you just want to understand human beings a little bit better.
And it also is very applicable to like kind of life in general. Like, I mean, I think we live in a world where people look at that sort of stuff and they look at those atrocities and they look at bad things that happen and go, oh, we've evolved past that. We've developed enough as a race, that as a species, that we have like outgrown our like outdated old sort of past and our like and yes, obviously that's not true, but like we're seeing kind of like over time that sort of thinking is like actually really detrimental, because we're seeing a massive rise in like conservatism and politically. We're seeing like and you look at like ordinary men is so applicable, I think, to a lot of like fundamentally, maybe not specifically, but fundamentally the core purpose of that book and why it was released is so applicable to like what's happening in like the United States at the moment with like and just this understanding of people generally. I don't think we need to even get specific with it, but like this understanding that doing nothing and turning a blind eye to stuff and not being directly involved in bad things that are happening is arguably just as bad as being someone who's taking part, because you are indirectly taking part by doing nothing to, and I think, again, I don't know enough about certain things that are happening in certain parts of the world to speak really deeply on it. But what I do know is that everywhere bad things are happening, and sitting by and like acknowledging it or not acknowledging it and doing nothing about it and just going, well, it doesn't actually directly involve me right now. Or like, I don't know what to do. That is like just as bad as like being an active participant in it, because you're recognizing that something's happening and you're choosing to do nothing about it positively.
If you have the means and the capacity to do something, you're probably obligated to.
Yeah, and it's like also not that hard to talk about stuff, to like spread awareness about things. I don't think it's like that difficult. Like I look at stuff like Australia's current like the domestic violence like figures in Australia are like quite disgusting, as is being like widely broadcast. And to be honest, I've seen a lot of stuff. Like I think domestic violence actually like kind of does a disservice to what it is. It's just straight up like just violent acts and like murder, not always murder, but like, violent acts towards generally women by men. But I think like the fact that like recognizing that, I would be shocked if I spoke to someone and they said, no, that's not a real thing. That's not happening. I think everyone, I don't want to say everyone, but I think most people are willing to recognize that it's happening, but to sit and go, oh, I don't need to talk about that stuff because I'm, especially as a guy, going, well, I don't do that, so I don't need to like talk about it, or I don't need to advocate for change, is like doing as much disservice to women as the person partaking in it, because you're recognizing that it's happening and you're choosing to not try and do anything about it when you have the means to,
I will say this: if you don't have an in-depth understanding of a thing, it is probably the more sensible thing to not speak about it, though.
Yes, but
if you can acknowledge, yes, it's going on.
But why would you not then try and get a better understanding of it?
If there's no one in your life that is directly being affected by it, and you have a lot of things, there are a lot of things to prioritize in life that you can't be at the forefront of change and everything. People's lives can be very full and busy. You don't have to have a strong opinion on everything, even if it's important that's going on.
I'm not suggesting that you do.
You just need to have your due diligence before you speak on a thing necessarily. Because I think it is, you can't say, yeah, it's wrong, it's crazy. Like, it would be great if there was none of it. But I don't know if you have to be able to go beyond that if you haven't put yourself in a position where you don't know more than that because for whatever reason you haven't had the time to put the focus into actually understanding it deeper than that. Because a lot of things that doesn't get talked about with this and violence in general is the impact that alcohol has on violence. The amount, it's somewhere in the region of 50% of all violent acts have some element of alcohol involved from victim or perpetrator.
Yeah.
Like, that is a huge correlatory factor that I don't know. Does that get expressed enough that the effects of alcohol on these things? I'm not sure if we hear about it much.
I don't know. And I mean, kind of to like add to that, like there's a very clear trend that male on female violence occurs drastically more often when like after or during like sporting matches. So like state of origin, there's very clear data that shows that on state of origin night, domestic violence cases increase by 40%. And it's very clear that during like just sporting events in general, there is an increase like in Premier League, like Premier League football matches, like domestic violence when there's a football match on. And look, there's a lot of different reasons for this, probably also because like a lot of Premier League matches occur like literally constantly all the time.
Yeah, over a weekend.
But then also it's on a weekend when men are spending probably more time with their wives, so there's more opportunity.
And also more drinking too.
Yeah, but yeah, that idea that like state of origin is and I don't want to like, this is not a stance on NRL or anything like that. But this is simply stating like what I think about it. Like state of origin is a big event within Queensland and like East Coast Australia society, like cultural society. And so it makes sense that people are getting together with their mates, or like they're having beers at night with their family or with their wife or with their girlfriend or whatever. And then you're watching something that you are passionate about because it's your team, it's an us versus them mentality. And then when you lose or something doesn't go your way, taking that out with the addition of like probably alcohol, it makes sense that like those two things are feeding into each other.
There's been research showing that if you're a diehard supporter of a team, them losing and winning feels like you losing and winning. You have the same neurochemical reaction. Yeah. So the pain of a loss feels like a pain that you've just lost something yourself.
Can't imagine what someone like. Do you know who Catman is?
No, I don't know who Catman is.
So Catman is like the head supporter of the Geelong Cats AFL team.
Sure.
He dresses up like a cat. He paints himself like a cat every game. Puts in these like, I think he, controversial. I don't know if this is actually true, but I think he got his like teeth like filed to look like cat teeth.
Committed to the bits.
Yeah. Like imagine being that obsessed with something. Like he must feel like every time Geelong lose, like that it is just like the grief must be so intense because you are like so attached. Like they are your people. That is a part of like your identity. And so yeah, to bring it, like it makes perfect sense that like people who are like, you have experienced grief, you need to take that out if you don't have proper methods of like responding to that disappointment, that grief and that anger, you know? And it's why like, I don't know, not like on Married at First Sight this year, I'm sorry, I'm like absolutely...
We got so far.
I am decreasing the intellectual value of your podcast by bringing this up. But like on Married at First Sight this year, there was a big scandal of like a guy who punched a wall while having a fight with his girlfriend or his wife, whatever. And there was a lot of like discussion and discourse online about whether or not that's actually a big issue, because he didn't hit her. And so it's like, okay, well, that's not actually, is that domestic violence? Is that, and I think like, it's really important to note that like what that sort of action and what that sort of behavior brings to light is your inability to emotionally regulate. And so I think like, yes, it's great when that sort of thing happens. Like that's a very common thing for men to like be openly aggressive when they're disappointed, to punch a like pillow or like, you know, kick something or whatever it might be. And I think like all that's showing you is, yes, there is a difference. I want to make it very clear. There is a difference between hitting your partner and punching a wall, punching a pillow, or getting angry and going and doing like, I don't know, 10 minutes of boxing in your boxing bag outside if you're frustrated. But I think and it's not really fair because they're also completely different things. But like what it shows is maybe not so much the boxing example, but like getting frustrated and punching a wall. What it shows is you have an inability to emotionally regulate, and your emotional regulation strategies are dangerous and ineffective and reactive.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I just think it's like important to make those sort of distinctions in that aggression is not an appropriate way to respond to anger and frustration.
Yeah, displays of aggression like that.
Because whilst they are different and you're not directly punching someone, it's still like imitation, and it's still like open aggression is intimidating to anyone.
Yes,
like if you turn
whether
around,
intentional or not, it's still intimidation.
Like we're having this conversation, you get frustrated with something I say and you slam your fist through the table. Like that's intimidating.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm a tall white man.
Yeah.
So it's like, you just have to be like, I think it's important to have like that sort of understanding. And yes, I think the conversation can get a bit straw man when you end up getting into like the little intricacies of like aggression and domestic violence. And there's so many different, and like in the last 10 minutes, I've taken it in about 45 different angles because there is so much complexity and so many different ways you can look at it. And I think people use that to kind of distract from what the fundamental thing is that people need to be better, especially men need to be better at regulating themselves.
And awareness, recognizing.
Yeah. Recognizing that what you're doing isn't
when it's
okay.
appropriate and not, and that's clearly
not
an appropriate form of aggression.
Yeah.
Whereas within a sporting context, aggression is more appropriate. Yeah.
And also something that like I've done a lot of work with young men especially is looking at like we have this like this is a very basic thing, but having like almost like a traffic light sort of system in terms of like you got your blue, no, it's not a traffic light, but like having like blue, purple and red zones and like understanding how that can impact you. And so when you're in your blue zone, you're a bit mellow, you're a bit melancholy, you're feeling a bit flat, a bit low. You're in your red zone, you're hyper, you're aggressive, you're on like that edge, you're more like anticipatory, like you're on edge. And then that purple zone is just like that mellow. Like I would say right now, I'm in more of like a purple zone. I'm feeling very comfortable, very relaxed, very like at ease with like my space and who I am and like how I'm feeling. And so like it's important, I think, for men especially to be like conscious of like where they're at. And it can be a good way for men to look at emotional regulation in having those zones as kind of a guide so that early you can intervene early and not get yourself, because like once you are in that like high red zone and you're on edge, you're anxious, you're angry, you're frustrated, you kind of like there's nowhere to go from there except outwardly like getting that out in some way. But what you want is to kind of stop that from happening, and early intervention and recognizing those signs like, hey, I'm starting to feel a bit frustrated. And again, this is not something you need to say, but like just in your head being like, this is starting to frustrate me. I'm going to step in now and change now so that in 10 minutes, when I keep going down this path, I do not do something I'm going to regret in 20 minutes when I'm back down in my blue zone and I go, what on earth was I doing then? You know what I'm, so it's like,
it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And so I think that is like, when we were talking about actionable things that guys can do to kind of help them with their emotional regulation outside of just surrounding themselves with the right people and talking more and stuff like that, that is a really useful tool, I think, for especially like the demographic of like young men demographic, because they are more likely to have those violent outbursts and those like aggressive outbursts. That can be a really great way.
Would you say when you recognize it, you start to? I would imagine it's immediately a good way would to be journaling.
I love journaling.
When okay, this made me get to this level.
Yeah.
This put me in the red zone.
Mm.
I saw that I was getting there here. I could have intervened at this point. Would it be like literally outlining through reflection, or in the moment it's happening? You could probably do both, right? But reflection's probably going to be the most common one. Like, oh God, I had an outburst. What caused that? Try figure it out.
You have to do both. In the moment, you have to be able to recognize and have a strategy to, and like honestly,
but the reflection's probably going to come first. Like after the first incident.
Yes. So
which triggers it. Like you got to think, okay, I got to that. Now I'm going forward. I'll try to pay attention as to how.
Yeah. So in a perfect world, you would be able to do this before you've had your big outburst, right? But like the reality is that that's unlikely. So what would generally happen is that you do hopefully have like either get really frustrated and be like, oh, I got to like, I got to get out of here or whatever. Or do something that is like, that was probably like, I didn't like how I behaved just then. And it doesn't have to be really extreme aggression or whatever. You can just be like, just get really pissed off and be like, walk away. But yeah, I didn't like how I behaved just then. Go journal about it or reflect. Just reflect on how you behaved, what caused, and also really important to state here that when you're doing this, don't try and reflect on the way you've behaved immediately after it's happened, because you're not able to take an objective third person view as to what's happened. You're still on edge emotionally. Like if I get into a fight with you and then 20 minutes later I'm trying to kind of process like, oh, what happened, I'm still going to be in the mindset of like, oh yeah, but Dino said this and then like he did this and then I did this and then he did this to make me do that. You need that like that 2-3 days.
It's the benefit of sleeping on it.
Yeah, you need that time to reflect and to allow your brain to subconsciously process your behavior and the situation, so that then you can come back, look at it. And this is why I am a big advocate for journaling consistently every day, because what it allows you to do is, I'm not an aggressive person, so this is not something that I necessarily do for that aspect, but just for general reflection on like my behavior and like what's happening to me in my life and processing that stuff. Just for 10 minutes a day, I journal in the morning. And it's something that I've spoken at length to you about wanting to do it for a long time. And it's something that I do now consistently every day. And I think it's really important to be able to do that because it sets up the processes and the habit. And then you're able to kind of do a reflection consistently over time, so that when you do have those outbursts or like those heightened emotional states and those heightened emotions, you can kind of, you've done the work beforehand a little bit. And then journaling doesn't seem like as big of a deal as maybe it would have if you got really, really heightened emotionally and then started journaling.
Yeah.
Because it can feel a bit like, and this is something that I was talking to someone yesterday about this, and they said to me, they were quite anxious and they were exhibiting quite high symptoms of anxiety. Like, and I said to them, should we try to do some breath work, or should we try to take a moment and really like center ourselves and do some like grounding sort of stuff? And they said to me, no, that stuff doesn't work. I hate doing that. Like I only do that when I'm in a really bad place. And so what you can probably take from that is that association between, I'm doing this because I'm in a really bad place. And so when I'm doing that, I am in a really bad place. And so what you want to do is to get these habits and these emotional regulation strategies consistently every single day, or just consistently over time. It doesn't even have to be every day. It can just be like once a week or whatever, so that you're used to it. And so that, one, you've practiced it, and two, this is something that you do, not this is something you do when. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's really, really critical, because it can, if you have a really bad emotional outburst or a situation where you didn't like the way you behaved, and then you start something, it can feel like you do that when you do something bad or when you aren't behaving the way you want. And that's really not the association you want. You want the association of this is something I do because it helps me in my life. And yeah, it can be really tricky to make that stick, but then also that can be a tricky challenge that a lot of people in therapy can face.
That's huge because it's not intuitive. You would think once the problem presents, then I start doing the thing to fix it. But the associations are so impactful.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Like once you start to associate a thing with a thing, then trying to switch that association becomes a whole problem in itself.
Yeah. And it's something that I've seen a lot, especially like in sport, is a lot of boys. I've worked mostly with young men, and they will be in a game. So perfect example is I worked with the Brisbane Lions Academy, the boys that are about to get drafted into the AFL. And I worked with them from September of 2024 through till the end of May 2025 this year. And in September, October, November, December, January, February, start of March, I and myself and my sports psychologist that I was working alongside, we really tried to promote consistent practice of our emotional regulation strategies. We were doing breath work before training, trying to, grounding stuff before training, figuring out what our like strategies were when we're in game and we're making mistakes and we can't kind of overcome that. We're feeling like overwhelmed. Trying to figure out strategies during our preseason, our training consistently, so that when we get to the game, we are ready to face those challenges that might come. We know what the strategies are, and we can utilize them because we practice them. And like, obviously we get to like game number 2 and a boy's having the biggest anxiety attack he's ever had because he's under all this stress and there's selection pressure and all this stuff. And he goes, I don't know what to do. And we're like, okay, well, hate to break it to you, man, but like, we've been telling you this stuff and it's not going to work. It's all very well and good to have a reset technique or a reset behavior, but it's not going to work if that's not what you do when you reset. If you can't just like be like, okay, well, Harry told me that sometimes some people just retie their shoelaces when they're stressed or when they make a mistake in game to reset. But if you haven't practiced that as your reset technique, then you're just tying your shoelaces. So it's like really this stuff, and the same is very applicable to your journaling, to your breath work, to your, going for a morning walk or reading a book on the train. These are all techniques you can use to help yourself emotionally regulate, because it teaches your body that this is a part of your regulation and not this is what I do when I'm in a bad place.
I think that's massive. I think that's hugely valuable. That is a great framing. Develop the good strategies before they're necessary.
Yeah.
Make them a part of you, because that's how you're actually going to cope with the thing, because it's more familiar.
Exactly.
It's bringing you back to baseline.
Yeah. Which is why before when I asked you like what you think your coping strategies are, they're all very ingrained in kind of like your life. Like they're all things that you just do. And so you are able to recognize, not to speak for you, but it feels like you're able to recognize that this is just stuff that you do. And so it inherently helps you regulate because it's just a part of your life and it's things that you do.
And just consistently doing a thing you're interested in, for me.
Yeah.
I also don't experience a huge amount of highs and lows.
Yeah. That's really...
I'm relatively stable in my emotions. Very few peaks and droves. If it is, it's just... I've isolated it from like fatigue with kids being very young. Like it's usually sleep deprived induced.
And that's really important to recognize as well. And I would like to say that too, is I personally have never faced any diagnosable mental challenges. And so it's very easy for me to sit here and say, this is what you should do. It's a whole nother story for someone who is battling severe depression or severe OCD or severe psychosis or anything like that, and just go, oh, mate, maybe try some breath work. But I think really what I'm trying to promote is that seeking help and then making that a part of your life rather than a part of the event or whatever it might be. I do want to acknowledge that, one, I am currently quite an emotionally stable person, and that does make it a lot easier for me to sit here on my high horse and be like, yeah, this is what you got to do. But at the same time, what I'm saying and what I'm promoting is actionable things that, and the core kind of concept behind it is it will work.
Useful strategies.
If you put it consistently into your life.
You're putting forward useful strategies that at the very least are a great starting point to try and help regulate before, like even or during, while seeking more help if that's not working, if it's not enough.
Yeah. And also most people don't have severe depression or severe OCD or severe psychosis or severe trauma. Most people are just facing day-to-day life challenges. If you do have any of those things, please go and try and get a mental health plan and see a therapist, or do some sort of like mental health clinician like intervention. But for the general person who isn't experiencing severe mental health challenges, just finding consistent strategies that work for you to cope day to day will be beneficial.
Our bodies love consistency. Whether it's sleep, it's routine. We function very well with routine if we can implement it. It's so good.
Yeah. Sleep's massive too. Like,
whole podcast on sleep.
Oh my God.
There are plenty of good ones out there.
I love sleep. I love sleep. What's his name? Who's the guy that was on Human?
Matthew Walker.
I love, that was, I think I told you I was trying to listen to his podcast as like a mental break during my honors thesis like days. Like I'd go to uni from like 7:30 till 7:30 and I'd take like I did like the, what's it called? The 25 on 5 off, the Pomodoro method. Do you know what I'm talking about?
You may have mentioned this.
It's like it's a way of studying that allows you to take mini mental breaks.
25 minutes study, 5 minutes off. Okay.
And so what I do is I do 25 minutes of work on my honors thesis or whatever uni work I was doing. And then I'd spend 5 minutes going for a walk outside listening to this human podcast on sleep.
There, Harry.
Oh, mate. And it was, I did that for maybe like a month. And then I was like, I actually have to stop doing this. Like, this is so, I was just like going back to work being like, I've got 20 minutes left of this. I didn't feel refreshed in any way.
Yeah. Well, no, your brain didn't turn off. It just switched.
It's brutal. It's very brutal.
That is a good podcast series. I don't know if you listened to just an isolated one, but
I've listened to the whole series.
The 5-part series.
Very good.
Probably 15 to 18 hours of content, but that is probably something everyone should listen to at one point because the way it's very digestible. Very digestible, but it's just a long haul. But if you want to learn about sleep and the value of it, there's no better resource that I can think of.
Yeah, it is valuable, but I think like it can also, people can fall into the trap of overcomplicating it a little bit. And there is some stuff in those series and with these sort of content within like that sort of content generally, like your humans and stuff like that, where there is some stuff that isn't like really necessary to know and it can feel like a bit overwhelming. But it is like the general kind of importance and the promotion of like sleep hygiene and, consistent sleep times, consistent sleep period, ensuring that when you're going to sleep, you've got a sleep routine, that sort of stuff and it's so easy as well.
Sleep phenotypes. Do you remember the sleep phenotype section? That is the most interesting one because it explains why there are people who, doesn't matter how much they try to reset the circadian rhythm to be a go to bed at 8, wake up at 6, they'll never be operating at their absolute ideal because they are hardwired to be a person who goes to bed at 12 o'clock and wakes up at 10 or 8. And that is just, you can make it better. You can create a good routine. But there are reasons why there are some people who find it more difficult. I think just from an empathetic perspective to your colleagues or your peers or your friends, like, why do you always go to bed so late and wake up so late? It's, their body is hardwired to be that because it was hugely beneficial to us that people who were awake at all periods of the day, evolutionarily, but they suffer the most because most of our world is not set up for a person going to bed at 2, waking up at 10. But it's very interesting. I found that that's why it's so hard to reset it even by an hour or 2.
Yeah. And I mean, I used to consume a lot of, Kevin Hart has promoted himself as someone who only requires like 5 hours of sleep.
Kevin Hart, The Rock, Michael,
Oh
all
my
these
God.
guys.
And they're like, yeah, I don't know how they do it. They're like, and I think it's all because like it comes out of necessity of like their job and their obsession for their career and stuff like that, that they go, oh yeah, well, I only sleep 5 hours a night, but that's fine because that's like what works for me. And it's like, I'm sure if you gave them the opportunity to go to bed at 10 p.m. and wake up at 7 a.m. and still earn the same amount of money and still have the same like career output, they probably would appreciate it.
Oh, they would, at least long term, their bodies would thank them. Matthew Walker was talked about this.
Yeah.
He said the amount of people who can actually, their body actually does what it needs to do and functions in that. I can't remember what it was, but it was a very, very small number, even smaller than what you would probably think. There's very few who can actually do that.
Yeah. And if you think you're one of those people, you're definitely not.
No, you're probably not. It's like
you're probably
7 to 9 if you can.
You're probably just tired.
When you have children, it's not possible when
No.
they're young enough, but for those periods, you just cop it, but you're going to benefit more from 7 to 9.
Yeah. And there are always going to be distractions and stuff like that that are keeping you up. But like, really, I'm a big believer there's nothing that I'm doing after 9 p.m. that is more beneficial for me than sleeping. Like, really.
Yeah. There'll be times where that's true, times where that's not, but most of the time.
Most of the time.
Your sleep's pretty freaking important.
Yeah, almost always. Almost always.
All right. Well, Harry Cohen, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Good
mate.
pod. It's a pleasure to have you. Anything we didn't cover that you really want to get out there? But I think we covered a few things, but the floor is yours.
No, there's honestly really not much. I think I would have, tragically for everyone listening, we didn't get to talk about High Rocks, but like that's totally fine. I don't think anyone actually cares at all. But no, I think just to really drill home what I was saying before about like the running stuff, and just really like understanding that running is really difficult, and like please listen to your body, and like running a marathon is very impressive. So if you've done that, or even like running 10Ks is very impressive. So I'd be proud of yourself.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.